Welcome back to the channel. This is Trendy Storm and you are watching fourth and final part of What If Naruto Only Has Kyuubi's Chakra, not his soul. If you enjoy this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Now wasting no more time, let's start the story.
As Sakura walked through the hospital hallways, she couldn't help but smirk at herself. She had been duped twice by her alleged sensei while her teammates were out having fun with their Sannin sensei and elite Jonin. The first person to seemingly vanish from the world was Kakashi, who simply stated, "Sasuke needs training." Kurenai, on the other hand, was much more explicit in her justifications for not training her, stating that her responsibilities as a sensei and to Shino came first. However, it didn't help that she abandoned her in the hands of her purported friends. The logical part of her brain countered inner Sakura's tirade about cursing them all to Lord Enma's fiery grasp. Her inner self corrected her, saying that both Anko and Yugo literally scared her to death. It's more like they made you paranoid and afraid to speak negatively about them. But in spite of the long days and painful nights, Sakura had never felt more resilient or assured of her skills than she did at this moment. Strength had to be earned because, prior to the training, Anko claimed that her stamina was pitiful, her taijutsu was almost non-existent, and her general kunoichi skills were at best mediocre. Although Yugo was a little more kind in her evaluation, she did note that her genjutsu was advanced, her knowledge of medical ninjutsu was solid for a kunoichi of her age, and her intellectual prowess was something to be proud of. However, she also added that she couldn't use her genjutsu skills with her reserves, that her medical training still had many gaps, and that intelligence was at best on a situational advantage in the world of shinobi encounters. She obviously had a lot of work to do, and she did it. Sakura stifled a shiver and thanked Kami for bringing an end to her month-long ordeal. Sakura was pushed to the limit by both senseis, who then eased up just enough to allow her mind and muscles to recover before attacking her once more. Sakura's perseverance paid off, and by the end of her training, she was able to gain Anko's respect, albeit reluctantly, by knocking out the snake kunoichi with a blow worthy of Tsunade. But given that Yugo-sensei has been making me study all of Lady Tsunade's ancient scrolls, that's to be expected, her impetuous half said loudly. Yugo acknowledged that it was a good punch and that her persistent training was finally paying off. The true highlights of their month together, though, were when Anko let her sign the snake contract and Yugo gave her a ninjutsu of her own, both of which were of Anbu grade. And it was quite the day. Sakura added that she was smug that after almost 30 days of non-stop ass-kicking and receiving a kick-ass weapon and summon contract as a result, she would be able to hook the serpent, wielding kunoichi with a mean right hook. Before focusing on her destination, that sense of joy grew as she turned another corner in the hospital's labyrinthine layout. She entered the tiny hospital room and walked to the side of Lee's bed with a gentle smile on her face. Sakura was able to observe firsthand a rare moment of relaxation for Gaia's protege as the spandex wearing taijutsu master was sound asleep. Sakura was glad to see Lee not running around like a dynamo, even though it was a little odd. Playing with a lock of Lee's hair, Sakura confessed to herself that it makes him more approachable and human. Now long and unkempt, the normally pressed and gelled hair framed Lee's face and fell over his eyes. Sakura burst out laughing, even admitting that it looked good on him. "Lee, you look good," Sakura thought. I never thought I'd use those two words in a sentence, and then she felt guilty. But before she could scold herself in her head for the remark, Lee started to move. Wondering if he had imagined the pink-haired girl laughing, the boy ventured softly, "Sakura?" The girl whispered, "Yes Lee, I'm here. Sorry for waking you." But then she noticed she was still playing with Lee's hair. Sakura was horrified and made a hasty attempt to remove her hand, but Lee was quicker than her and was able to take the flower maiden's hand in his own. After a moment, Lee added, "Don't be, I enjoy your visits," and he was truly delighted to see the girl. Sakura made every effort to conceal her shame, but the truth was that, despite reading about such incidents frequently in her romance novels, she had never personally experienced them. To put it mildly, it was flattering and a welcome change from the naive and occasionally violent behavior of her genin squad. Sakura only managed to say, "Thank you, but you really should be getting your rest," before questioning why she had come here in the first place. Her visits initially served only as a way to console a friend, but they gradually started to change. Sakura became perplexed when her visits to Lee shifted from being about improving Lee's mood to being about improving her own. She said, feeling proud that she could make fun of her milder half, "It was about the time you started fooling yourself into thinking that you visited him because you wanted to practice your medical ninjutsu. Lee is merely a friend, so shut up." Sakura sprang back, her features taking on a sour expression. But Sakura knew she was in denial, no matter how much she wanted to think otherwise. Although Lee was a wonderful friend, she had come to know him over the course of the previous month. He had grown into so much more. He's funny, sweet, determined, passionate, Sakura enumerated before having an epiphany. At what point had she started to regard Lee as more than a silly boy with no sense of style? But before she could think about how her relationship with Lee changed, a rough hand brushed the loose hair out of her face and her anxieties along with it. Lee added, "Hiding behind a curtain of hair doesn't suit one such as yours, Sakura-chan," but then blushed at his directness. Lee didn't feel bad about what he had done, even though Sakura and he were embarrassed. Even training with Guy couldn't replace the sense of confidence he got from being close to Sakura, but he couldn't explain it. But for Sakura, Lee's remarks resonated deeply. She had been made fun of for years because of the size of her forehead, and eventually she grew accustomed to it and thought she would have to conceal it. The pink-haired kunoichi was rocked to her core when someone said she shouldn't be ashamed of it and even implied that it made her beautiful. Sakura stammered, Lee, I have to," as she tried to get out of the awkward circumstance. Lee implored, "No, don't leave," before quietly concluding. The boy thought that maybe he had been too direct with the person he was in love with, but he was powerless to stop himself when Sakura was involved. And Sakura obeyed in spite of herself. "Sakura, I'm sorry if I've made you uncomfortable." "Lee, you don't have to be sorry, it's just, your heart belongs to another," Lee concluded for the girl. His voice tinged with melancholy. He only needed Sakura's silence as an answer. Lee sighed and fumbled in his few possessions on his nightstand before returning his attention to the girl with the flowers. "I want you to have this, Sakura-chan. They were my mother's and she told me to only give them to someone I would truly cherish. I don't know if we'll end up together, Sakura-chan, but I can honestly say I will always cherish you, whether it be as a friend or something more," Lee said as he got out of bed. Lee pinned his mother's flower hair clips to the sides of her face with an uncharacteristically elegant gesture, and the two genins' faces gravitated toward each other before Sakura stopped suddenly, resembling a cheerful blossom that has just flown to the ground. She could see by looking into Lee's eyes that he meant what he said and that he was here to stay, whether it was for friendship or something else entirely. Sakura leaned over and kissed the taijutsu master's cheek, grinning ever so softly. As he watched Sakura leave his room, shocked, Lee could only smile. Kin cast a scornful glance around the drab apartment. She detested the so-called headquarters of her team. For once, she was relieved she didn't have a Jonin-sensei because if she did, she would have to share a room with the two perverts who made up the rest of her genin cell. The lodging barely had enough rooms for 3 people. As her team leader, Dosu, walked in, Kin added, "Speak of the devil." With an angry tone, Kin told her mummified cohort, "Dosu, have you seen Zaku? Kabuto. Sama asked us to meet him 10 minutes ago, and he still hasn't shown up," making her contempt for her tardy teammate clear. The boy simply laughed and walked to the door. Dosu said nonchalantly, "Figures I'd have to be the one to tell you. Kabuto summoned Zaku over 10 minutes ago. I just figured he told you the same." When Dosu saw Kin's reaction, he smirked and took an unhealthy pleasure in watching the girl perspire. His teammate was known to have a torch for the silver-haired med.nin. In fact, he dared to say that she held the man in higher regard than life itself. Kin worried silently about whether Kabuto was still upset with her for losing the preliminary match. Though he didn't express it directly, Kin could tell that the nice things he had said to her following the battle were laced with a great deal of disappointment. Seeing that made her failure more painful than the actual loss, she threw herself into training with almost unnatural vigor to improve her readiness for the impending invasion. "I'll give Kabuto-sama what he wants because he's expecting more." With the image of her idol firmly ingrained in her mind, Kin swore, "I'll give him everything that I am." Dosu teased, carefully omitting any information about his defeat in the preliminary bouts. "Geez, don't look so serious. Kabuto just called Zaku in before you. Probably just wants to go over the battle plan once more with you two losers. The way I hear it, Orochimaru Sama wasn't too pleased with your performances, and even a softie like Kabuto won't be able to save you from his wrath if you mess this up." As a distant expression crossed her face, Kin said, "Don't talk about Kabuto-sama like that. Unlike you, Kabuto-sama is kind, caring, and gentle." When Dosu retorted, "Don't go having fantasies of the guy while I'm here, and don't act like you don't, because you moan his name in your sleep," the kunoichi turned a vivid scarlet. Kin angrily exclaimed, "You bastard," before grabbing her belt, "Senbon." As he hurried out of the room, Dosu said, "Don't be mad just because you've been found out, and besides, word on the grapevine is that your precious Kabuto-sama is gay." As much fun as it was to sneer at his teammate, He had his own mission to complete. Fuck you, you bastard. Besides, whoever told you that obviously doesn't know about our extracurricular meetings, Kin muttered quietly as she left the apartment as well. Kin reached the sound's base of operations, which was concealed inside one of the apartment buildings in the center of the village, while traveling automatically. The young Kunoichi secretly marveled at Kabuto's ability to establish a safe haven in the middle of enemy territory, but she quickly set her admiration aside as she approached Kabuto's quarters. Kin's thoughts were interrupted by her idol's voice, but she must stay focused. The sound will be depending on me. Orochimaru will be depending on me. Kabuto. Sama will be. With great enthusiasm, Kabuto concluded by removing his blade from Zaku's torso, depleting the boy of what little life remained in him. Such a shame, Zaku, and here I thought that all the time I spent grafting those air cannons to your arms would have actually helped you be useful. No worries though, your death, as well as the death of that gullible girl of a teammate you have, will help realize the birth of a god. Kin watched in horror as the scene unfolded in front of her, and she forced herself not to gasp in shock when Zaku's body struck the ground with a loud thud. Even though she was in a state of shock, Kin's training kicked in right away, and before she knew it, she was on the rooftop of the safe house. Her body was yelling at her to run as quickly as she could and to avoid turning around, but her mind did not want to accept what had just happened. Sadly, she wasn't quick enough. In his typical friendly tone, Kabuto said, "Kin-chan, where are you going?" The reassuring sound nearly made Kin forget that he had just killed her teammate in front of her and that he was now wearing the evidence on the side of his face as though nothing was wrong. The girl stammered, Kabuto. Sama, Zaku is dead, as she retreated from the silver-haired nin, perplexed by how quickly he had gotten close to her. As he embraced the younger girl, Kabuto explained, "Shish, it's all a dream. You shouldn't worry about Zaku's death. He'd outgrown his usefulness to me and Orochimaru while alive, but in death he will bring about the realization of my plan." Kin initially resisted. Her survival instincts were on high alert after seeing her teammate die, but as she took in Kabuto, a wave of relief passed over her after a moment. Even the worst of her fears were allayed by his appearance, manner, and even scent, which assured her that his arms were the safest place for her to be. Nevertheless, something still told me to leave quickly in spite of everything. "Oh. Okay, Kabuto. Sama, you always seem to know what's best." Kabuto lulled on, his gentle smile never leaving his face. "Thank you, Kin-chan. Thank you so much. I am so glad to have you as a subordinate and even more so as a lover," he said. Kabuto said, "Goodbye," in a sweet, silent voice, before skillfully slicing her torso with his blade. Looking down, the astonished girl saw tangible evidence of what her body was telling her. She looked up at her betraying lover, gasping for air, only to discover that his words perfectly captured the state of her world. Shatter. The quiet rooftops of Konohagakure were illuminated by an exceptionally bright full moon. It was even more unusual for someone like Zabuza, who built his reputation and livelihood by remaining invisible, to enjoy the view of Konoha's moonlit rooftops. The renowned Mist Devil was seated next to his two wardens, Anko and Ibiki, as well as an Anbu who had been personally chosen by the Hokage to go on the reconnaissance mission with them. When the Anbu took off his mask, he shocked his fellows by breaking protocol. "Beautiful, isn't it? Not many get to appreciate the sight, but after my stint in Anbu, I learned to find any sort of good side in a job like ours," he said. "Hey, aren't you that Iruka guy the blonde brat is always yammering about?" "Funny, because I could have sworn he said something about saving you from imminent death," Zabuza said, scrutinizing the solemn Chunin critically when the man didn't refute the assertion. "There is a discrepancy." Reflecting on both Naruto's detailed, and likely exaggerated, description of the night and his own recollections of the man's abilities, Zabuza wondered how an Anbu of his caliber could have come dangerously close to death on a mission that would be regarded as child's play. According to what he knew about that fateful night, a Chunin defeated and nearly killed the Anbu, even though he was injured by many projectiles. No, everything about it smelled of deceit, especially after he saw him use high-level Suiten and Raiden Jutsu like a seasoned Black Ops agent and transform the most commonplace ninja weapons, kunai and shuriken, into precision-killing weapons using only chakra and a little creativity. After explaining, Iruka pulled the Kevlar mesh from his uniform to the side, revealing a single symbol that resembled an Egyptian awl. Seeing I. "Yes, I'm that Iruka, and it seems Naruto's spared no expense in telling the world of my momentary lapse in skill. However, the truth remains that I owe the child my life, because if it were just me that night, I fear that traitor and this seal may have gotten the best of me," Iruka continued. "That's a..." Anko interrupted Ibiki mid-sentence and demanded, Curse seal. And where in the hell did a goody-goody like you get such a tainted tattoo like that? In my younger days, I was a bit of a problem child, so much that when I was in the academy, one of my instructors suggested that I be showed the error of my by a true disciplinary. Orochimaru, Anko interrupted once more, her eyes narrowed, the Chunin's tail resembling her own. Yes, apparently the Sannin was running a program where he would instruct misguided, but potentially great, youth in the true meaning of being a shinobi, per some Hokage mandate. Unfortunately, the operation was a front for him to find suitable candidates for his experiments. He picked me up the same way, and after I survived the initial tests and some of his teachings, he made me his apprentice, Anko concluded for the individual once more. As they locked eyes, Anko realized that Orochimaru had messed up nearly as much as he had her. Additionally, the snake Kunoichi silently resented the Hokage for keeping such a secret from her, knowing that she experienced depressive episodes due to her situation, and that there was a group of people just like her right in front of her. Iruka added numbly as he ran his hands over the bridge of his nose, unconsciously calming Anko's rage with a strangely familiar gesture. Yes, and apparently, he tried to recreate the Nidaim's unnatural affinity for water and lightning within me. The results were partially effective, however. I will always have this scar as a reminder of what he did to me, he said. By the time I was found, the Kyuubi attack was already bearing down on the village, so myself and the few others that survived had their seals contained, much like this one, and were offered a place in the ninja program, and eventually were all drafted into the same Anbu squad. After the friendly Chunin completed his piece, Anko voiced everyone's opinions and asked, and what squad might that be? After Iruka said, we often go by many names, however our most famous is simply the Vizards. A chakra burst spread throughout the area, inviting everyone to go and look into the disturbance. Dosu was transporting an unconscious kin to a special preparation coffin not far from the recon team that was returning. He had been assigned by none other than Kabuto to remove the body from the headquarters, but he had no idea what kin had done to merit being buried alive. When Dosu landed on the rooftop of Kabuto's secret laboratory, he set aside his own curiosity to see the pink-haired Kunoichi he had met in the Forest of Death standing across the room. Dosu muttered, "Shish. Exactly what I need," searching the exposed rooftop for any kind of cover. Unfortunately for him, any possible hiding place was easily visible to the trained eye due to the bright moon, and Sakura was trained if she was anything after the previous month. Sakura began, "What are you?" but she quickly jumped back to avoid Dosu's blow, swung her new ninjutsu at him, and released a chakra pulse to break the disorienting sound waves. Just as she was about to chop off his head, Dosu was able to raise his melody cannon, but the force of the blow sent him sailing back to the other side of the rooftop where he had previously placed kin. Dosu gazed incredulously at the Kunoichi with the pink hair. About a month ago, he had been fairly certain that the Kunoichi's weakness was taijutsu, but now she was acting like a professional murderer. It was barely perceptible, and he didn't think Sakura even realized she was doing it, but whoever had been training her for the previous month had given the pink-haired girl a killer instinct. After observing Sakura's increased level of threat, Dosu revealed a second melody cannon to the female by pulling back the sleeve of his other arm. Dosu made fun of Sakura before lowering his distance from her. "I was planning to save this for after the finals, but it seems you'll have to do for now," he said. But unlike before, Dosu attacked in a continuous, practiced kata that made Sakura defensive rather than just swinging once. Because Dosu could attack and defend at the same time, she was unable to land a solid hit despite her ninjutsu's increased reach. Sakura changed strategies and used a lightning-fast sword swipe to put some distance between them before using a brief but ineffective genjutsu. The strategy was successful, and Sakura swiftly ran a finger along the length of her blade before smearing blood onto the snake tattoo on her forearm, leaving Dosu stunned by the illusion. The sensation of her blood made her tanned skin tremble a little, but Sakura was determined to finish her jutsu, and as Dosu released the genjutsu that had bound him, numerous snakes were emerging from the web of seals on Sakura's forearm. Dosu retreated onto the building's side after seeing the Senei Itajashu previously, then rushed along the sides in an attempt to outflank Sakura. He was able to avoid the snakes and get close to Sakura's blind spot because of his successful gambit and her lack of experience with the technique. Dosu saw an opportunity and charged forward with a strong haymaker, but Sakura's ninjutsu blocked him once more. Unfortunately for her, Sakura's defenses were weakened just enough for Dosu to get his second fist past them because he had both weight and momentum on his side. Sakura had to mentally ground herself while allowing her chakra to counteract the dizzying effects of Dosu's melody cannon in order to stay focused. Fortunately, she was able to break the sound Genin's spell before it could fully take effect, and with practiced ease, righting herself in midair, thanks to her affinity for genjutsu. With a quick thought, Sakura unbound the chakra binding that bound the snakes to her arms, letting them slither freely and divert Dosu's attention as she darted through a series of hand seals. Doden. Saihendaichi, Earth Release, Crumbling Platform. What a waste! As he watched the building's roof collapse and send him crashing to the ground below, Dosu remarked angrily, "What has this girl been doing for the past month?" Fortunately for him, Sakura's jutsu had no effect on the lower levels, which remained stable. Nevertheless, Sakura now possessed the high ground and the associated tactical advantage. Enhanced endurance, the development of Ken and Taijutsu, Genjutsu at the Chunin level, Dodenjutsu, tactical thinking, and a summon contract. When Dosu noticed that Sakura's abilities now more closely resembled those of a Chunin than a fledgling Genin, he realized that this was not the same Kunoichi we had seen in the forest. He realized that perhaps confronting the girl head-on wasn't the best course of action after the unexpected revelation. Unfortunately, he realized that fact a bit too late, and now he was dealing with the fallout from his choices. Kabuto lulled as he emerged from the shadows of his now demolished lab. "Now this is truly a shame, to have to kill all three of our fledgling Genin in one night, Dosu. I at least held a bit of hope for you, because you see, unlike your two teammates, at least you realized the importance of self-preservation," he said. Kabuto. With a deceptively innocent smile, Kabuto asked, well, what do we have here?" Sakura cursed herself for disclosing her position because it was the kind of smile one gets when concealing something in plain sight. Sakura thought, so much for gathering kin and letting some Anbu deal with her and Dosu, as she realized that her plan was doomed after Kabuto appeared. Kabuto said, utterly disregarding Sakura for the time being, Tisk. Dosu, this does not bode well for you. Not only did you fail me in the preliminaries, but you also managed to lose the body that I asked you to bring to me, as well as leading the enemy to one of our bases of operation." Kabuto understood that too many things were already in motion for one leak to stop, even though it might be deemed arrogance to completely ignore an enemy, especially one that is intelligent. In any case, he had no intention of allowing that leak to spread. Dosu stammered, Hi Kabuto. Sama, I am aware of my previous failures. However, I was working on recitifying my previous mistakes, as Kabuto's ki came alive. Its crushing force was felt even by Sakura, who was outside the direct path and lacked the strength to speak, let alone flee. Compared to Orochimaru, this is worse. Sakura tried to will her body back into control, thinking in shock. Kabuto sighed and said, "No excuses," before hurriedly taking Dosu's head out of his shoulders. Dosu only had a perpetual expression of surprise on his now severed head because the action happened so quickly that he didn't even have time to fully register the pain. "He's going to kill me. He's going to kill me. He's going to." Behind the terrified girl, a familiar voice yelled, "It's okay, Sakura, I won't let him get you." Sakura forced herself to turn around and saw her friendly academy instructor's face, only to discover him wearing Anbu clothing. "That's captain level." Kabuto, Anko said tensely, knowing the man to be one of the important individuals the Hokage had instructed them to locate. "Anko. It is a pleasure, one that I'm surprised to have, considering that Baki should have taken care of you all as well as that pest of a proctor that had been tailing me," Kabuto said lightly, his ever-present smug smile still intact. "He's being introduced to a new method of torturing called waterboarding by our good friends Ibiki and Zabuza," Iruka said formally, alerting the silver-haired traitor to his presence. Well, if it isn't Iruka-kun. It has been some years, hasn't it, Scar-chan? I can hardly recognize you now, especially with all the dreadful-looking gear on you," Kabuto said nonchalantly, his personality returning to his typical whimsical demeanor and relieving the area of the heavy ki. Sakura exhaled guiltily, as though a heavy burden had been removed from her chest, only to discover that Iruka was still braced for combat. Iruka shot back, his chakra growing exponentially with his rage. "I'm surprised your mind can even function, knowing that you betrayed me and all those others. Don't think I forgot your role in my transformation," he said. As if his chakra was wishing the elements he commanded to come to life, the air responded by becoming heavy and almost crackling with raw energy. After saying, "Still bitter, I see. Well, there will come a time and place when we can finish our score, but for now I must be off," Kabuto walked out of the room with a nearly unintelligible wish. Iruka's body uncoiled when he realized he had used a shunshin, knowing that the bespectacled teen's escape would be nearly impossible to track down. Iruka suppressed his rage and agreed that he had a village to assist in defending for the time being, but that he would have to deal with the traitorous Med.Nin at a later date. Sakura, go give that sound Kunoichi some medical attention. She doesn't have to be fully healed, just enough to ensure that she survives and can regain consciousness soon. She may have some information for the events to come and additional intel at this point which could be critical, Iruka shouted. Waking up Sakura from her, the girl responded appropriately and started following directions right away. In the meantime, Iruka turned to face Anko and gave her a serious glance. Knowing that the Kunoichi's understanding of her former master was at best patchy, Iruka asked quietly, Anko, how much do you know of Orochimaru's techniques? The Kunoichi, whose mood had been severely soured by the night's events, asked in a chipped tone, not much other than his normal jutsu and sealing abilities. Why? Iruka remarked, because I can think of only two techniques that evoke either a coffin or a Shikifuin seal, but neither of them are used in unison, while pointing down to the items in Kabuto's study. A coffin bearing a Shikifuin seal and an urn with the words Hitaki Tsukumo written across its length were concealed behind a complicated-looking seal array. Iruka was perplexed by this discovery and his thoughts immediately turned to Kakashi, the last surviving Hitaki, and his three students Sakura, Sasuke, and Naruto, who were all now caught up in the same perilous web that Kabuto was weaving. Anko, report this to the Hokage. I have a bad feeling about this. Naruto marveled at the sight of the full moon as he gazed up at the brilliant night sky. Naruto was grateful for the serene view, especially since the most important battle of his life was less than 12 hours away. After a month of intense training, he rebranded himself as a shinobi with the help of Jiraiya, Hinata, and Haku. He no longer needed the raw power of his chakra, a family heirloom, and a half-established sword skill to get him through. Actually, Naruto felt like a complete shinobi at last. Naruto reflected cynically on everything he had learned over the previous month and asked himself, and how couldn't I with everyone bombarding with their so-called training? With his perversion and training methods, Jiraiya may have been a world-class bastard, but Naruto finally felt like a real ninja after learning some elemental jutsu. Even though he only had two for each of his elemental affinities, he now had a way to set himself apart from other swordsmen. Speaking of which, Fukasaku drilled both armed and unarmed kata into his mind, helping him get better in that area as well. In terms of chakra manipulation, his Kenshoken and his frog katas blended harmoniously to form a taijutsu style that was distinct from Juken's but had an intriguing twist to its execution. However, he spent more time using new skills in real combat and less time learning them from Hinata and Haku. He eventually gained a good grasp of both the Shunpo and the Urate through their spars, and he was learning how to use both simultaneously and quickly. Additionally, he gained more experience fighting a Juken user and devising strategies to defeat someone as skilled as Neji through sparring with them. At the moment, Naruto was following the same rules that Guy had established when discussing Lee's battle with Gaara, which involved using a high-speed combo to defeat Neji before he could strike back. But in order for that plan to succeed, Naruto knew he would need to use every weapon in his arsenal to force Neji into a position. For the past month, he had been practicing combining his father's methods with his own nin, ken, and taijutsu techniques so that they all worked toward the same end. Naruto thought out loud, even with all of that, I still can't help but feel scared, as he struggled to control his own nervousness. According to rumors, Neji was training with Lee to help cover his own weakness, and during that training, some intriguing information about both taijutsu practitioners had surfaced. Naruto wasn't particularly bothered by whatever that meant, but I was terrified that Neji was likely training just as hard as he did. What if it's all a matter of innate ability? Am I really superior to Neji? Naruto asked, gazing up at the moon as though he were expecting a response. Naruto was left to think on his own, as was to be expected, until he became aware of a presence approaching from behind. Naruto yelled, you know it is impolite to stare, especially if the person doesn't know you're watching, before causing his Reiki to flare. When Naruto saw Gaara poised on the brink of sanity, his chakra and his stalker's chakra filled the air. Although Gaara's murderous thoughts were by no means infrequent, the red-headed genin's mind was particularly agitated during the full moon, which made him even less inclined to indulge than usual. And the bloodlust in the air was making Naruto's intentions painfully obvious, even though he had no idea what effect the moon was having on his opponent. And to what do I owe the pleasure? Gaara's sand began to rush forth, but was stopped by a raw pulse of Naruto's Reiki. Mother wants your blood, no she demands it, he cried. To his and his tenant's surprise, Naruto deliberately channeled his wind element because it came naturally to him. Little did he know that his dormant wood element also pushed against Gaara's sand, appeasing the raging demon's Yuki. Naruto smirked and joked, "Well, tell your mother it's off limits until the finals, and even then she'll have to work for it," hoping that the prospect of a fight would temporarily appease Gaara. With trepidation, Gaara ventured, "Mother." To his relief, the raging storm that had been his mother was now hardly more than a whisper in the wind. Naruto went on, "I see you've finally calmed down," as the sensation of impending death subsided with Gaara's ki and the adrenaline began to wear off. Defying Naruto's earlier conclusion, Gaara threatened, "I don't know what you did to mother, but you will pay. You and this village of yours." Naruto responded angrily, "Over my dead body. There's no way I'd let you, much less your imaginary mother, lay a hand on this place," and he instantly tensed as though he were anticipating a fight. But just as it appeared that Gaara would leap, the insane redhead turned and started to walk away. What the devil? As Naruto watched Gaara vanish, he thought to himself, "This guy is definitely insane. 1 minute he's threatening my life, and the next he's walking away as if nothing happened." Oddly enough, though, Naruto felt a sense of comprehension after meeting the sleep-deprived genin. He would defend his village, but more importantly, he would defend his values. His desire to defend outweighed his fear of the unknown, regardless of how powerful or intimidating the adversary was. And if he learned anything from his brief meeting with Gaara, that will continue past the point of death. Now that nothing is stopping me, Neji had better be careful. As he headed back to his house, anticipating the start of the finals, the genin pondered. Troublesome, was all Shikamaru dared to say lest he attract the notice of the 3 Suna ninja who were seated across from him, quietly chatting among themselves. To his right, Choji was contentedly chowing down on a bag of chips, clearly relishing his now occasional snack. Even though Shikamaru considered Choji to be his brother and best friend, the boy's lack of awareness occasionally annoyed him. How could he be so at ease at this moment? All he can do is eat chips when we are going to be fighting for our lives for the entertainment of our so-called country. Shikamaru worried silently as he tried to get his thoughts back in order. Shino's sudden statement, "Calm yourself Naruto-san. Your anxiety is irritating my Kikai," diverted Shikamaru's focus from his current predicament and placed it on the typically quiet teenager. For a brief moment, Shikamaru wondered if Shino was truly silent. If he was regularly in contact with thousands of microscopic organisms every day. But the brief discovery only briefly diverted his attention from the true source of his annoyance. Most of the ninja from Konoha were late. In addition to making their village appear unprofessional to potential customers, he reasoned that there must be more going on behind the scenes given the recent activity he had been witnessing among the village's top ninja. Moreover, it was obvious that Gaara, who had threatened to murder him on the way in, was sitting across the room and appeared more ruthless than usual. He was actually more battle-hungry than he had ever seen, making even his teammates nervous. Shikamaru muttered again, "Definitely troublesome," and to his relief, another Konoha finalist chose to show up. Neji nodded curtly and said, "Nara, Akamichi, Aburame," before taking a seat on the Konoha side of the waiting area. Despite this, he made sure to leave plenty of space between himself and the other Leaf finalists, most likely due to some ingrained sense of superiority. Although Neji wasn't exactly Shikamaru's favorite person in the world, in fact, he was on his hit list because of what he had done to Hinata. He was a skilled fighter, and more importantly, he would be a valuable ally to have on the Sand and Leaf Nin's side in the event of a battle. That fact, however, did little to calm him when the Suna Kunoichi caught sight of him, and the expression she gave him could only be described as a hybrid of predatory and rightfully angry. Great, Shikamaru thought, cursing his bad luck, another irate woman to contend with. Dealing with a psychopath like Gaara was easier for him personally because, at least with him, wanting to kill him wasn't personal. But when it came to women, his promise to never touch one usually backfired, and in this instance, it was going to rip him a new one. Ignoring the remark about scared little boys, Shikamaru broke eye contact and focused on the proctor who had entered the waiting area and was eating senbon. The preparations are complete and the final exam is underway. I am Shiranui Genma, and I will be the proctor for this leg of the exam. The rules from the preliminaries still apply. However, I would like to note your performance will be a direct reflection of your village, so make your choices wisely. The first matchup will be between Uzumaki Naruto versus Hyuga Neji. Will both combatants please make their way to the stadium? The Jonin responded quickly. Shikamaru said out loud, "Where's Naruto?" with half frustration at the blonde's tardiness and half rage at the blonde for accelerating his match with the Suna Kunoichi. Temari followed her siblings out to the stands and taunted them, asking, "What, are you that scared to face me?" She was rapidly developing a fondness for playing with the Nara boy, partly due to his antiquated worldview and partly due to the frustration it brought him. But before Shikamaru could even start his reply, Naruto materialized in the middle of the room with a barely perceptible swish. When Shikamaru muttered out loud, "Blondes, too damn troublesome for their own good," Temari and Naruto gave him a shady look. In a mocking voice that was an exact replica of Ino's, Naruto yelled, "Oh Shika, don't be like that. The only reason I was late was because I couldn't decide what to wear." Before admiring their comrade's new attire, Shikamaru and Choji both chuckled at the allusion to their earlier training sessions. Naruto no longer wore the dark blue vest and shorts. Instead, he wore a long black jacket that hung just above his ankles and had orange flames at the bottom, along with loose black pants that tapered off beneath his black anbu shin guards and into the tops of his sandals. Naruto wore a basic black shirt underneath the jacket, a black matte anbu chest plate, arm guards, and a few black pouches around his waist, along with his reliable bakken, which completed the set he received from Jiraiya. After noticing that his two former sparring partners were obviously impressed by his new attire, Naruto took the last item out of a concealed flap in his jacket, exposing a black and orange bucket hat that was stripped. Haku then helped him put his new ensemble together. Neji cut Choji and Shikamaru off before they could comment on Naruto's new appearance. "And here I thought you backed out of your promise because you were too scared to face me," Neji said. As anticipated, Naruto's rage was raised to an almost tolerable level by Neji's remark. However, instead of exploding as the Hyuga had anticipated, Naruto simply controlled his temper before giving the boy a menacing grin that hinted at a great deal of suffering. After uttering the words, "Such a waste, to think that those would be your last words," Naruto headed for the stadium floor. "Look, the exams are about to start." "Wait, who is that?" Ino exclaimed as Genma, rather than Hayate, emerged in the middle of the stadium. To her astonishment, Sakura didn't appear to be at all alarmed by the change. In fact, if Ino had to speculate, she would speculate that Sakura may have been aware of it beforehand. When Ino saw a tiny flash of concern cross Sakura's eyes before the girl swiftly refocused her features, she ventured, "Forehead, are you alright?" Sakura dismissed her friend's worry, saying, "Everything's fine Piggy, I'm just worried about Naruto and Sasuke-kun. Both of their matches are coming up, and neither of their opponents is someone to sneeze at." Although Sakura felt guilty about lying to her friend, she knew that, in light of the current situation, a few partial lies were worth it for the benefit of the village. Sakura thought back on what had happened the night before, all the way up to the encounter with the Hokage. At first, it appeared that a plot was being planned in the village, with the alleged genin Kabuto at its head. However, after hearing Kin and Sanjanen's confession, it became clear that the plot was much more intricate than she had initially thought. The ball had been rolling for far too long for anyone to stop the invasion that was at their doorstep. To survive the impending storm with their homes and lives intact was the best they could hope for. As if that weren't scary enough, she received information from her unexpected appearance on the small scene last night that none of the other genin knew, and because of her performance that night, she was suggested for a field promotion to Chunin. The most promising young people in the village would already be gathered and prepared to take on the task of organizing her fellow rookie genin into a small task force. The only drawback was that she was unable to inform anyone in advance. To allay at least one of her concerns, Sakura said, "Hey Ino, you brought your equipment like I told you to, right?" As Ino casually responded, "For the last time yes, although I don't see why you keep insisting I should. We're in our home village and are just spectators for the finals. It's not like we are going to need them or anything." Sakura stopped laughing. Ino repeated, "We aren't going to need them, are we Forehead?" But this time her voice was devoid of all humor. "I don't know Ino. It's just that I heard from a few people that a few of our guests have been lurking around the village. While normally I wouldn't worry, but after seeing what some of these guys are capable of, I'd rather be safe than sorry." It was all Sakura could say, but it didn't really calm Ino down. The significance of keeping their discoveries confidential was emphasized by the Hokage. In addition to preparing for an invasion, the village didn't need a panic mob, so the fewer people who knew the specifics, the less likely it was that civilians would hear about it. Sakura's gaze shifted to the middle of the arena, where she saw Naruto wearing his new outfit. She observed how the colors fit him with a gentle smile. Even if it was only a little flare on his jacket and hat, orange was a daring choice for a ninja. But as soon as she saw Naruto's opponent moving toward the center as well, the smile vanished. She was almost as annoyed by the haughty Hyuga as she was by Naruto, but she secretly knew she couldn't compete with the jerk. Sakura added bitterly, "And judging from those bandages on his hands, I might be even less of one now." The boy's hands were covered in bandages, which were evidence of the training he had received over the previous month. A voice she recognized said, "This will be a good match," over her shoulder. Sakura couldn't help but smile as she looked up and saw Lee and the other genin peers who were conversing directly behind him. Even though everyone had received the memo and had prepared their equipment, the pink-haired girl was not particularly comforted by this. Sakura remarked, "Yeah, but I hope Naruto can come out on top," as the taijutsu expert sat next to her as the fight started. Genma asked, "Are the contestants ready?" before turning to look at the two boys, who were occupied with glaring at one another. Both genin chimed, "Ready," without looking at each other. Genma glared at Neji and said, "Now then, I don't want any repeats of the last bout. When I call the match, that's the end of it." The Hyuga simply nodded his head, maintaining eye contact with Naruto while accepting the important killer instinct. Genma yelled, "Begin," and vanished in a whirl of foliage. Without saying a word, Naruto activated his Urade and burst forth as his Reiki began to flare. Naruto felt his power surge forth and punched Neji in the head, determined to remove that smug grin from his smug face. But at the last second, Neji raised his arm to block Naruto's blow, but to his astonishment, a burst of chakra violently passed by his face, flinging the stray hairs in its path. Naruto followed through and kicked Neji in the head, but this time the Hyuga didn't take any chances and slid under the blow while using his Byakugan. The ambient chakra that typically encircled Naruto like a cloak surprised him by condensing and moving along the arc of Naruto's blows. The method reminded me a little of Juken, but to compare them would be like comparing a sledgehammer and a scalpel. Despite not breaking flesh, the chakra was incredibly powerful. After doing enough analysis, Neji used his advantage to attack Naruto while he was still too stretched from his high kick, only to have his chakra-filled palm collide with the air. Fortunately, he had panoramic vision thanks to the Byakugan. Otherwise, Naruto would have used his Bakken to render him unconscious. Neji quickly countered, but this time he kept following the trail of evaporating chakra left by Naruto's Shunpo. Naruto launched a swift attack before Flash, stepping away, but like his cousin Neji, who demonstrated adaptability at reading the chakra trails, his version of the technique left behind and was getting steadily better at predicting Naruto's next move. The battle went on in this manner for a while. "I got him." After concluding, Neji thrust his palm forward and used a Juken strike to kill Naruto in the stomach. However, the boy was replaced by a log. Neji swiftly identified the spot where Naruto had replaced himself by looking around. Neji saw Naruto's attempt at ninjutsu right away and charged headfirst, hoping to halt the technique before it was finished. But before he could get half of the way between them, a broad rock outcropping erupted from the ground, blocking Neji's route to Naruto. Doden. Seikitai, Earth Release, Rock Garden. Neji silently cursed, having learned the hard way that even the Byakugan had its limitations and that his all-seeing eye could not see through dozens of boulders filled with chakra. Knowing that attempting to cross the outcropping would only result in an air slash from Naruto's Bakken, Neji raced through the terrain maze and discovered that Naruto had a backup plan as well. Naruto muttered, "Sweden. Mazarapa, water release, violent water wave," just before a raging stream of water swept through the rocks, nearly sweeping Neji along with it. Fortunately for the long-haired boy, sticking himself to the ground was easy because of his extraordinary chakra control. Neji immediately assumed the Hokage stance and discovered that Naruto was within his divination's range. Without hesitation, he started to speed through the maze's flooded turns. Naruto watched with barely contained horror as his chakra-charged water slid past Neji like a soft breeze across the outcropping. Naruto, who had sparred with Hinata, was aware that each spin from the Hokage dance was similar to a miniature Kaden and that it could reportedly deflect both jutsu and kunai while keeping the Hokage user focused on their target. As the ground beneath him started to rise, Naruto wasted no time in forming the hand seals to Doden. Seikitai once more, but this time Neji was on top of him. Shit. As he lost control of his chakra and let it pour into the jutsu in a panic, Naruto thought this. The jutsu now created a single, tall spire that raised Neji and Naruto more than 10 meters into the air rather than creating another outcropping. Neji yelled, "2 strikes," and thrust both of his hands forward, only to collide with the boy's black bracers as he flew into the air to avoid him. Neji heedlessly trailed behind him as he executed the complex taijutsu combination in midair. 4 strikes. The boy yelled, 8 strikes. As the two plummeted through the air. Naruto was initially able to keep up with the blows, but as the pace increased repeatedly, Neji quickly overpowered him. 16 strikes. Every blow was now making its way to a tenketsu, even if it meant passing through Urate in his armor. 30.2 strikes. Naruto was in full retreat by the time the two hit the ground, his arms thrashing as he tried to block Neji's accurate and potent attack. Knowing what was about to happen, the blonde braced himself for the worst when Naruto backpedaled into the stadium wall. Neji yelled, 60. 4 strikes. As his hands appeared to vanish into thin air, each blow struck a tenketsu, and Naruto perceived each blow as Neji attempting to jam a senbon down each of his tenketsu. Fortunately for him, though, his tenketsu stayed open and his urate held true in spite of the numbing pain all around them. Naruto saw Neji getting ready for his next attack as he peered through his guard after the last blow. Kai. The boy began, the only warning Naruto had previously received coming from his flaring chakra. Neji exclaimed, 10, as Naruto cast himself into his shunpo. The view of the scene was obscured by dust flying in all directions. As they waited for some indication, everyone held their breath. They weren't let down when Naruto emerged from his shunpo across from the dust cloud, panting a little but not much worse for wear. Despite the extremely close escape, Naruto's armor was horribly scraped and the ends of his jacket were flayed by the clashing chakras. And I just got these, Naruto complained out loud while struggling to breathe. Although he would never again find himself in such a predicament, he did learn how lethal Neji was as an opponent. After giving it some thought, Naruto concluded that he would need to stay away for the time being, at least until he could weaken Neji sufficiently to carry out his scheme. The Barker's dozen of blondes started hand-sealing quickly after Naruto yelled, Cage Bunshin. 6 clones then materialized to his right and left. When Neji saw this, he braced himself for another Kaden, but then a plethora of chakra stars appeared in front of him. Futon. Tei Shuriken, Wind Release, Air Shuriken, Naruto exclaimed, and the air daggers shot toward Neji with remarkable speed as though they were being willed forward by an unseen force. Kaden. The two techniques clearly clashed, filling the arena with an unholy screeching sound before. Boom. The stadium floor was covered in a fine layer of dust as the overlapping chakra matrices finally overloaded, resulting in an explosion. The stands were silent as they awaited the two fighters' arrival. Their patience was not put to the test for very long because the approaching cloud started to swell as though it were being drawn into a storm before the match could be called. As he attempted to keep up with the multiple Naruto's quick movements, one spectator remarked, I didn't know a genin could move that fast, it's like his flickering in and out of existence. Another person said, well, look at that, it's almost like watching the Yondaime all those years ago, with a nostalgic tone. The first voice repeated, that brat's like Storm. A Urarashi, as a group of Naruto's peers overheard him speaking. When Akamaru barked in agreement with Kiba, he smiled broadly and asked, Flickering Storm, why does Naruto get the cool nickname and I'm left with nothing? Ino responded with equal vehemence, maybe it's because he beat you in the preliminaries. Now will you shut up, I'm trying to watch the match, but she did not overlook the irony in her final statement. Kiba muttered under his breath, I'm just saying, I think I deserve a nickname as well, only to discover that the match in front of them had taken precedence over him. As he continued to watch the match below, Kiba thought to himself, you'd better win, you blonde idiot, or else you're going to have a lot of disappointed people to come back to. Naruto and his clones kept circling Neji with Shunpo while constantly showering him with air kunai, oblivious to his new title. To a certain extent, the strategy worked because it kept Neji on the defensive. But the boy's skill with the Byakugan was superior to his cousin's, and as though Neji had sixth sense, he stopped every attack from his blind spot. I can move more quickly, but he's good, Naruto shouted to himself before accelerating once more. He and his clones now resembled a spectral army that vanished as soon as they materialized. The additional speed had a cost, as he could no longer split his focus between ninjutsu and Shunpo. Instead, he had to focus entirely on outwitting Neji to get a clean shot. Neji made a single hand seal after determining his opponent's strategy and then dropped into the classic Hokage stance. Grasping his ascending chakra, Neji rapidly shaped it in a manner never seen by any Hyuga before, until a faintly perceptible ring of electricity encircled both palms. The Hyuga yelled, Hake, Byakurai, 8 trigrams. Pale lightning, as a clone was pierced mid-step by a jagged line of white lightning that sprang from his fingertips. Using his improved vision to see Naruto's shocked expression, Neji proceeded with his attack, spraying his opponent with refined electrical chakra pulse after pulse. Until only Naruto remained firing, and on the other side of the clearing, every shot was able to hit a clone squarely. Hanabi was curious about the origins of Hake after seeing her cousin shoot lightning from his fingers like Juken strikes. Oto Sama, who taught Neji. Nissan those techniques. I've never seen Hake used like that before, she said. Heishi simply stayed glum as he looked down at the ongoing conflict, processing what he had just seen. Despite his extensive knowledge gained through years of study and experience, he came to only one conclusion. A genius like his nephew only comes along once every few generations. To pair our clan's renowned Jukin with such superior elemental manipulation, Heishi said, his potential is almost limitless, and then he activated his Byakugan. To his astonishment, though, his initial evaluation of his relative's method was nothing compared to what he saw through his Byakugan. The boy went beyond Neji's initial theory of elemental reconstruction by using pure chakra control to replicate the molding skeleton of a Raiden jutsu and then combining it with what appeared to be Jukin. Since Neji's taijutsu was able to bend and change to fit the jutsu skeleton he was shaping, Heishi was unable to claim that his nephew's technique was Jukin. This was because Jukin and jutsu were one and the same, unlike the old, traditional taijutsu his clan used. Heishi honestly responded, I don't know Hanabi, although if I had to guess, it seems as if Neji created those techniques, because it isn't like anything I've witnessed before, while turning off his Byakugan. His daughter, who was utterly mesmerized by the level of skill being displayed, watched in wonder as her cousin continued to battle the blonde who had grown so close to her sister. Hanabi said out loud, Oto. Sama, I thought the elder ruled that tampering with Jukin was forbidden for the branch family. As soon as the idea occurred to her, her father was unconsciously thinking the same thing, and he could tell that the elders in attendance were already frowning on the situation without even looking. I hope your strategy works, nephew, because if it doesn't, the shame you bring to our clan could end up costing you your life. Aware of his alleged trespasses, Neji redoubled his efforts against Naruto. After using his most recent technique to neutralize the boy's shunpo, he pushed Naruto back into a full-on taijutsu battle. Although the fight was initially in his favor, Naruto's strength and agility, along with the blonde's extensive use of the shadow clone technique, made it almost equal. Neji sidestepped another of Naruto's blows and then pushed another to the ground while leaning slightly to the side. His clothes were ruffled and some dust was kicked up by the blonde's Reiki blasts that followed, but overall it only demonstrated how well honed and accurate Neji's taijutsu was. Taking advantage of the situation, Neji swiftly grabbed both of the blonde's outstretched arms and, in a move reminiscent of Lee's strength, flipped them both, causing them to smash together before vanishing. But just as fast as he performed the move, a fresh group of clones appeared and challenged him to another taijutsu match. Neji did not survive the swarm despite his superior skill. When compared to the clones Neji saw more than a month ago, the frog katas and his urate gave each clone a significant advantage in terms of offensive and defensive capabilities. Neji paid a heavy price for that error. As desperation took hold for the first time during the fight, Neji came to the conclusion that he would simply outlast him unless he found a way to end this. While scanning the battlefield from beneath his protective dome, Neji was able to buy himself a small amount of space by spinning into another Kaden. Neji slowed his ultimate defense just enough to fire 2 Hokage Byakurai to cut a path to the blonde after spotting a lone Naruto just behind the group that would circle him. Now I have him. Neji then accelerated his Kaden and used 2 Hokage Kusho to drive himself in Naruto's direction. Naruto was furious when he witnessed the attack that sent Hinata to the hospital, but he quickly controlled himself because he knew that he only had a few seconds to defeat the technique, and it would require all of his focus to hit that mark. Naruto took a stance and lowered his blade, keeping a close eye on his clones as they hurled themselves in front of the grinder to slow Neji's progress. Despite their best efforts, Neji kept rushing in his direction like a gigantic Jukin drill. Naruto inhaled deeply and thought back to one of Fukasaku's lessons. Naruto briefly let go of himself and gave his chakra his full attention. Naruto sprang into action, taking in the world and Neji's attack simultaneously, willed it into the right positions, and charged it until it reached its maximum potential. Kei's no Doki. As the heads of Neji's drill and Naruto's Bakken collided, time slowed for both boys. Naruto pushed as hard as he could, barely breaking through the whirling mass of chakra, and briefly met Neji's gaze. Then, as time passed quickly, Naruto dragged his blade forward, slicing through Neji's body. Boom! Neji went flying forward, only to fall in a clumsy heap as the sound of their chakras clashing caught up with them. As the ramifications of what had just transpired also hit them, the stadium fell silent. In addition to defeating the highly favored Hyuga prodigy, the village outcast Naruto also damaged the clan's reputation by severing their ultimate defense of the Kaden. The stadium's collective conclusion was astounding. Genma was the first to awaken from her daze, and after glancing at Neji and Naruto, she proceeded to call the match. Winner Uzumaki Naru, Neji yelled, "Wait," and dragged himself upright. The Hyuga boy was still alive, though barely, much to the surprise of everyone in the room. From just above the end of his clavicle to the bottom of his opposite hip, the wind-powered blow had left a terrible gash. His own attack's rotation had contributed to the shape of his disfigurement. Neji and his clothes were also severely damaged by the miniature wind blades that were produced as a result of Naruto's technique. They tore apart the majority of his shirt, bandages, and shorts and took his headband and most of his hair with them. Nevertheless, Neji stayed upright and made a valiant attempt to approach Naruto in spite of his injuries. "You haven't beaten me yet, Uzumaki, not while I still have chakra. Will you walk away the winner?" Neji said out loud. Naruto was unconvinced, but it would prove nothing to continue the battle at this point. Neji yelled at Naruto's back, "This seal here is meant to show my dedication to my clan, my dedication to its heiress," in an attempt to incite the boy to fight. "The main branch says it's a mark of honor, proof of my loyalty to the family. However, I know what it really is. This seal, the caged bird seal, is a mark of shame. It is everlasting proof of the division in my clan, one that even twin brothers cannot hope to cross," Neji declared before turning to look at his grandfather. Despite his brash assertions, the elders of the clan above had had enough and were considering using the boy's seal to put an end to the disgrace he had brought to the clan, but they were halted when they saw the glare Heishi was giving them. With his rage finally erupting, Naruto turned to Neji and said, "Am I supposed to feel sorry for you? Is that supposed to excuse what you did to Hinata? Just because you bear that seal on your head, you're allowed to kill her own kin in cold blood." As Neji responded, "Fate has taken everything from me. I felt it prudent that she experience a fraction of my pain before spewing remarks of, knowing my pawn." He actually spat out the last sentence. Naruto shot back, his anger increasing with every word. So the years where Hinata was ignored because of her own crippling shyness and abused by her so-called family because he had his head so far up his ass doesn't count for anything, he said. "All trivial when compared to the burden of this seal." Naruto declared, "Well then, when I'm Hokage, I'll remove that seal and lift the burden," knowing full well that his words had just made him a lot of enemies in high places. One final taunt before lowering himself into a Hokage stance was, "Bold words for someone about to lose," Neji said. Naruto gave in, willing to risk everything for the opportunity to completely destroy Neji. "Okay, then, one more go then, your strongest attack against my strongest attack, and if you remain standing then I'll accept that you're fated to win this match and forfeit," he said. Recalling the fight between Hinata and her cousin, Naruto used the same power he had used to stop Neji from killing his cousin. "For you, Hinata, I hope this fulfills your desire to bring your clan together and brings back your Nissan. Kukagiri. Hake. Byakurai." As though lightning had actually struck the arena floor, there was a tremendous flash of light and a loud roar of thunder as the air-splitting slash collided with the pale beam of lightning with a loud clap. As the dust settled, the stadium watched with bated breath. The first to come out was Neji, who was completely worn out, his clothes even more ripped, and he had another diagonal scar on his chest that formed a huge bloody cross. But the obstinate Hyuga managed to stay upright in spite of everything. All of Naruto's friends' hearts fell in the stands. If Neji lived through it, Naruto would have to forfeit the match. As he raised his hand to call the match, Genma thought, "Tough luck, kid, but you did set your own stipulations. Winner." But before Genma could declare Neji the victor, the boy collapsed backwards, too tired to continue, and fell victim to Naruto's last blow. The Senbon. Chewing Jonin yelled, "Uzumaki Naruto," and the crowd erupted in cheers. Naruto accomplished the unimaginable by defeating the Hyuga genius. Naruto gave Neji a final look and wanted to say something, but he knew that anything he said would only make the boy feel worse about himself. Naruto humbly accepted all of the cheers for his victory and then departed the stadium in a respectful silence. Genma told Neji, "You know, kid, there just might be hope for your clan one day, especially if a guy like that becomes Hokage," as the medical staff arrived to hoist him off the field. Neji allowed a tiny, hesitant smile to appear on his face as he glanced at the Jonin and then up at the sky. Because Neji felt free for the first time since his father's death. "Very interesting genin you have there, Hokage. Sama. I wonder how he'd stack up to my Gaara or your Sasuke." Before whispering a message to his Anbu escort next to him, the Hokage said, "I'm sure Naruto-kun would prove himself against either opponent, but it seems he'll have to prove himself against your Gaara, seeing as Sasuke doesn't have a sense of punctuality. Let us not be too hasty, Lord Sarutobi. Many, including myself, are looking forward to my son battling against the last Uchiha. To cancel their fight, because of a small miscalculation, may be frowned upon by the masses." Although it wasn't exactly a dismissal, the Hokage's curt reply, as is being late is frowned upon by future customers as well as our exam proctors. Kazekage Sama made it apparent what the Hokage intended. How about we come to a compromise then? Shall we move my son's bout with your village's rising star back to the end of this round, and if he isn't here by then? The Hokage concluded, he'll be wondering if the D-rank missions will ever end 6 months from now, in a tone that was entirely serious. The Kazekage grinned behind his veil and said, agreed Hokage. Sama. Sick of breaking the rules for the young Uchiha once more, Sarutobi conveyed the message with a grim expression. If only the village knew how far he had gone to keep its last Uchiha, its rising star, safe. I wonder if they would still be so tolerant of the concession I just made for the child, Sarutobi thought, but he knew deep down that the young Avenger might not have survived to this day if the truth about the Uchiha massacre and Sasuke's survival were ever revealed. The village among the leaves did not want to be reminded of any kind of traumatic past, if their treatment of Naruto was any indication. Sarutobi sighed as Genma declared the match postponed, and Hiruzen watched warily for any indications of questionable conduct when the Kazecage's son forfeited his bout. Totally at ease, Sarutobi concluded, clearly remembering the impact the Kazecage's presence had on his children all those years ago. This isn't a man concerned about making a good impression for future customers, nor is he the same man who partially sealed the one-tailed Biju into his youngest son. Although most shinobi could be fooled by a henge or disguise, Sarutobi's reputation as the professor wasn't earned purely by his proficiency in jutsu. He was also a world-class tactician and detective, which contributed to his nickname. At that point, the professor had all the evidence he required to conclude that Suna was now seriously compromised and that even their elite jonin, like Baki, had fallen for this imposter's tricks. Who was this man behind the mask? That was the only question that remained. Sarutobi shifted slightly in his battle armor and thought solemnly, I suppose I'll find out soon enough, before he looked back at the arena. With his arm already cocked back for his lucky send-off onto the stadium floor, Naruto asked with a broad smile, so, am I going to have to push you, or will you go down willingly? Shikamaru actually took the initiative and leapt over the handrail and down into the arena after peering at Naruto, then over the railing, and finally back at Naruto. Kiba expressed what everyone was thinking when he said, if it weren't for the melancholy sigh and slouched stance, I would have sworn that wasn't Shikamaru. Naruto looked over the ledge and saw Shikamaru land, nodding stupidly in agreement. Despite the audible crunch he heard when the slack-jawed boy struck the ground, Naruto arched an eyebrow as he watched Shikamaru walk to the center stage in his signature pose, hands still in his pockets. Does Shikamaru have on weights? This just might be an interest fight, Naruto said out loud as he peered at the ring through shaded eyes. As Shikamaru looked around the ring, he thought about the open field and sparse forestation on one end of the arena and the terrain's remnants from the previous battle on the other. There were plenty of hiding spots and even more to extend his shadow's reach, but that didn't mean his match was already won. He still only possessed one primary jutsu, which his rivals had already witnessed, despite his advantages. Shikamaru continued, remembering the thrashing his opponent had inflicted on one of Konoha's genin during the preliminaries, plus there's her jutsu preference to worry about. He wasn't particularly skilled at long-range fighting. In fact, he found it difficult to match any long-range expert with his level of Nara jutsu without the element of surprise. As he reached the middle of the battlefield, Shikamaru considered his last options, either forfeit or somehow lure her out far enough for her to make a mistake. Shikamaru looked up at his teammates, and his gaze accidentally fell on Ino, who, with almost precognitive comprehension, traced her thumb across her neck, making it obvious that she would kill him if he quit. Shikamaru remarked cynically, well, so much for friends thick and thin, and plan A for that matter, as his mind started to race, trying to find a way to win in spite of the clear disadvantages. Temari, on the other side of him, smiled confidently. They were experts in immobilization jutsu centered on shadow manipulation, according to the intelligence she had gathered on the Nara clan. Although it is a very useful ambush and guerrilla warfare technique, it is not the best weapon when facing an informed enemy head-on. As she attempted to look the pineapple-headed boy in the eye, Temari secretly gloated that if I had realized that, so had he. She intended to psyche him out by letting him know that she was aware of every one of his skills and had a counter for each. He knew he would lose even before the match began because she was going to mess with his head so badly. What on earth is he looking at? When Temari saw that the Nara boy didn't even appear particularly anxious, she asked indignantly. For someone who was ill-prepared for combat, he actually appeared to be too focused. Temari's eyes followed his line of sight, settling on a deep trench gouged out by the final clash of the last combatants. As for the trench itself, it was fairly wide, probably half her height, and fairly deep, probably as deep as she was tall. But it wasn't the fact that Shikamaru saw her that bothered her, regardless of the tactical advantages the position might offer. She was concerned about the expression on his face because it was exactly the same as the one she had witnessed her Jonin-sensei Baki make when he was going to rescue them from a difficult situation. Sobering up from her easy victory high a bit, Temari reflected that perhaps this might not be so simple after all. Remembering all she had seen of the boy before her, Temari started to see that Shikamaru was a combat genius beneath the enraged chauvinism and gender stereotyping comments. Everything makes sense. Recalling the boy's match with Kin, Temari concluded, he uses that infuriating attitude of his to throw his opponent off until it's too late to realize that there's actually a brain underneath all that hair. Then, what she had assumed to be poor spatial awareness on Kin's part and dumb luck on Shikamaru's part appeared to be pure strategic planning on an innocent victim. "I'm not going to be next," Temari cursed before finally looking Shikamaru in the eye. Shikamaru's eyes met those of a hardened kunoichi, not the glare of a cocky predator. The boy only muttered, "Troublesome," before Genma gave the all clear to start the match. Kurenai questioned her chain. "Smoking, comrade. Do you think it was wise for you to put all your money on Shikamaru to win?" Asuma reassured his friend. As they sat down, "Believe it or not, the kid is actually a genius, and I'm not talking the average rookies the academy churns out every year. I'm talking 200 plus IQ genius, who stomps me at shogi regularly." After giving her peer a long look, Kurenai returned her focus to the stadium. Despite their friendship, Kurenai was reluctant to express her disapproval of Asuma's wager. Shikamaru, whose speed had improved significantly over the past month, broke for the trench as soon as Genma gave the all clear to start the match. Asuma and his father alternately destroyed any opportunity he had to cloudwatch, with brutal physical training over the course of the previous month. They claimed that his physical condition and his indolent attitude toward improving it were his weaknesses, even though he had the mental capacity to be a great ninja. Shikamaru was flung around by his opponent's wind blast, but his increased speed was insufficient to outrun Temari's wind attack. Shikamaru yelled angrily, "Shit, she's serious," and took his hands out of his pockets to catch his fall. Shikamaru was able to propel himself in the direction of the rock outcropping Naruto had formed during the first battle by pumping a good deal of chakra into his hands. But Shikamaru's escape was not unrecorded, and Temari nearly fell into the rocky forest he was using for cover with his second wind burst. As he considered his next move, Shikamaru whimpered without humor, "Great, now I'm trapped like a rat in the maze." Before removing his weights from his ankles, the boy thought, "Checkmate is the trench, but that sand girl knows something's up, though I doubt she fully understands what I intend to do with that position." The problematic items were not as Spartan as Lee's pair, but their oppressive weight had made Shikamaru's training even more intolerable. Shikamaru took a chance and glanced quickly around the field to find his opponent, only to discover that she had taken aim on the stadium's tallest rock outcropping. The perpetually whiny boy slipped back into his hiding place and observed that it was getting close to high noon. After calculating the distance between them and determining that he was too far away, Shikamaru dutifully noted, "This means my range will be at its shortest." But before Shikamaru could complain any more about luck working against him, a faint ring filled his ears. The boy followed his instincts and flew behind another crag as Temari's blast passed through the area where he was hiding. Even though Shikamaru was spared from the attack, he now understood how hopeless his circumstances were. At the moment, he was disadvantaged on practically every level of the competition. When combined with her ranged futon jutsu, Temari's use of the high ground rendered any attempt at open combat pointless. Furthermore, even though the weight training increased his speed and stamina, he still needed time to get used to moving without them, so any attempt to alter his current position would probably fail. He didn't have time, particularly since his opponent could use a simple wrist flick to spam sharpened wind knives. "I need something to divert my attention." Shikamaru observed the items in front of him and pondered. Shikamaru only carried his weights and a long spool of ninja grade wire in addition to his usual arsenal of projectiles. With quick thinking, Shikamaru attached the wire spool to the weights by clasping them together so that only one end of the weight would be down. He was hiding behind rocky walls when another wind burst, splashing against them. Shikamaru sprang into action right away, diving to the side of the rock formation that was unharmed. The shadow user then launched the device straight at Temari after spinning the tethered weights above his lead like a makeshift bola. Furthermore, Shikamaru's timing couldn't have been better. Temari was overextended and therefore the least equipped to handle the heavy projectile, which he had timed to strike just as her attack was coming to an end. Instead of being batted aside like Tenten's projectiles had been during the preliminaries, the weights cut through the winds like a revolving bola, despite being heavy and unwieldy in comparison to a kunai or shuriken. But Temari was much more skilled with her weapon than Shikamaru had thought, and she redirected the bolus upward with a backhanded swing. Her triumph was short-lived, though, as she suddenly noticed the almost undetectable ninja wire fastened to the makeshift weapon. Shikamaru exclaimed, "Kage Nigiri no Jutsu, shadow grip technique." As a ghostly hand appeared from beneath the weight's shadow, Temari jumped back, knowing that if she was caught, her defeat was guaranteed. Fearing that opening her fan would increase the size of her shadow and, consequently, her chances of being caught, the fugitive Kunoichi did not dare to do so, even though her fall was more than 3 stories high. Instead, Temari absorbed all of the shock when she hit the ground by concentrating her chakra along the soles of her feet. But the hand persisted in its ferocious pursuit, reaching its limit as it was about to clamp down on the girl's shadow. The bolus and wire fell limp to the ground as the shadowy hand swiftly retreated its influence and snaked back to its starting point. Temari breathed a sigh of relief at this. Who knew that the slothful jerk had the ability to make her perspire? But the threat had been genuine, and Temari thought it was time to call it quits on the match. As Temari reached into her clothes to retrieve the costly explosive, she thought sinisterly, "Let's see how that idiot likes it when my fan blows a high-yield explosive note his way." However, as she moved her chakra to prime the seal, she felt the cold touch of tempered steel against her neck. From behind her, Shikamaru said, "Not so fast," his hand poised to move if she even blinked incorrectly. When Genma intervened to break the impasse, he discovered that although Shikamaru was in the killing position, Temari already had the explosive note armed and that killing her would only send them both to their deaths. Without realizing it, the Jonin exclaimed, "The contest is a draw. Both combatants are unable to act without killing one another, so neither advances to the next round." While the entire audience exhaled. Even though it was shorter and less action-packed than the previous fight, many viewers were still impressed by what had begun as a filler fight and swiftly turned into a fierce contest of cunning. Shikamaru moaned, "Glad that's over," and slouched back down, lowering his arm. "H. How did you get behind me?" Temari stammered in surprise, observing inwardly that Shikamaru was a little frightening when he was standing erect. However, Temari swiftly chastised herself for letting such a thought even cross her mind and ruthlessly banished it as soon as it did. Shikamaru calmly explained, "Kagesachi no Jutsu, shadow step technique. It allows me to step between shadows, but unless they're large enough to completely enshroud me, I can't use it," as he gestured to the trench he had been keeping an eye on at the start of the match, of course. But the lazy boy forgot to mention that range and chakra limitations also had a significant mitigating effect on the jutsu. The Nara heir reasoned that it would be better to keep her somewhat unaware of my method in case we had to repeat this, and then he turned to face the arena exits. Temari, utterly frustrated with the situation, called out from behind the boy, "So, that's why you were eyeing the trench from the beginning of the match? You knew I would notice and decided to use my own caution against me?" Maybe, was all Shikamaru had to say after realizing how much fun being troublesome could be. The excitement in the stands was palpable. 2 thrilling games had already been played in anticipation of this one, in which the Leafs' top rookie would take on the Kage's son. And based on the results of the previous 2 games, this one might end up being the most memorable Chunin exam ever. Without saying a word, Gaara vanished into a swirl of sand and then resurfaced in the middle of the ring, his gourd already uncorked and the sand enveloping him like a shield. As he scanned the battlefield, Gaara couldn't help but feel a little irritated that his opponent hadn't emerged to confront him. After all, a displeased Gaara was a lethal Gaara. As he waited for his opponent, Naruto sensed a change in the atmosphere surrounding Gaara, his killer intent literally growing more erratic. Naruto couldn't help but feel anxious as he thought back to his encounter with the redhead the previous evening. Even though he didn't like Sasuke, he didn't want him to pass away too soon at the hands of a crazy murderer. Is Kakashi Sensei somewhere? And as though summoned, the masked shinobi emerged in a brilliant swirl of foliage, Sasuke behind him, appearing as though he hadn't ventured out of the woods for more than a month. Without showing any tact, Kakashi questioned, "Did we make it in time?" Although Genma was strongly tempted to eject them for Kakashi's deadpan comment alone, he reluctantly nodded in agreement. Without saying a word, Kakashi used Shunshin to get to the stands, arriving directly behind Naruto before any of the genin could follow him. Wondering where he stood with his renowned teacher, Naruto thought, even after all of that training, I'm still leagues behind him. On the one hand, Naruto felt that Kakashi had failed as a teacher because he and Sakura had been left in the dark for the past month. However, Kakashi was likely aware that they had other teachers to cover for him when he wasn't there. Naruto felt like a child right away because he knew that Kakashi had only pulled Sasuke to the side due to the seriousness of the situation, just like he had done to him during the wave mission. He did, however, give in to a small sense of jealousy for Sasuke. Why shouldn't I? Although he was secretly excited to see what Sasuke learned over the course of the month, Naruto justified this by saying that he got to have the legendary Hitaki Kakashi teach him some of his 1000+ jutsu while I only received cryptic hints towards elemental reconstruction. I did as you asked, Kakashi said, leaning forward to speak to Naruto in private while pretending to be interested in Gaara and Sasuke's trash talk before the game. And that would be? Help Sasuke become stronger, Kakashi replied solemnly. Naruto sarcastically responded, great, so what you're saying is you pretty much shoved dangerous jutsu after dangerous jutsu down the emotional bastard's throat, recalling the final exchange he and Kakashi had just under a month prior. Actually no, Kakashi said with a one-eyed smile, anticipating the reaction he would get from his blonde genin. As expected, Naruto gave the Jonin a look of complete incredulity, which made Kakashi explain himself. Actually, all we did was work on his physical conditioning with taijutsu and chakra control and capacity. Taking a page from your book, I weaned Sasuke, if you will. Naruto was pretty certain he had taken that line from one of Jiraiya's perverted books, but he didn't give Kakashi the satisfaction of seeing him wince by forcing back the unsettling mental image. Naruto couldn't resist giving Sasuke a newfound respect as he returned his focus to the arena floor. Naruto pressed his rather snarky teacher for a direct response, asking, so, you're saying any new shit that Sasuke pulls out of his ass is something he invented himself? Kakashi's response, more or less, was his way of telling Naruto that this was the best he would get. Naruto whispered, then this might be more interesting than I thought, as a beaming smile appeared on his face. Genma yelled, begin, and sliced to mark the start of the sentence. Both fighters launched into action as expected, with Gaara's sand blitzing Sasuke with little abandon. Sasuke was faster, though, even though the possessed earth moved with remarkable speed. Indeed, one of the genin in the stands was struck by his speed. Lee stammered, That's, as it became increasingly clear where Sasuke was coming from. Your taijutsu Lee. That's what Sasuke has been doing this past month, training his body so that he can attain the sort of speed you used to combat Gaara's sand. Although, I can say that he isn't terribly good at moving that quickly yet, and his stamina isn't quite where it should be if he hopes to maintain that level of agility, Kakashi concluded for Lee, lessening the blow of having his labors replicated. Lee courteously responded, Hi Kakashi. Senpai, but what does Sasuke intend to do with that speed? He really hasn't made any attempts to engage Gaara yet, despite his conflicted feelings for the Jonin in front of him. When Guy heard this, he became concerned because, out of all the jutsu Kakashi used, only one seemed appropriate for this particular circumstance. With hesitation, Guy asked, Kakashi, you didn't teach the boy that, did you? If you talking about the Reikari, then no, I haven't taught Sasuke the finer points of elemental reconstruction yet. However, he has known the Chidori for quite some time now, Kakashi said as he met Guy's gaze. The green-clad Jonin wanted to object to teaching a child such a risky technique, but he also understood that he couldn't hold Kakashi accountable for the same thing since he had done the same to Lee. Guy wondered what plan the two had devised during the month-long break, so, if he already has the tools to pierce Gaara's defense, why hasn't he already done so already? Guy asked. Kakashi concluded by pointing back to the match. See, that's where it gets interesting, because like I said to Naruto, I didn't just give Sasuke any jutsu. I stressed that he take what I already taught him and use it to make something that is entirely his own, he said. Sasuke shouted, Chidori Nagashi, as blue lightning started to dance around him like fireworks. Sasuke remembered his training with Kakashi and thanked him for emphasizing the importance of developing his chakra control and capacity in addition to his physical fitness, even if it meant doing 5-hour taijutsu spars on top of different bodies of water. As he calculated in his mind how long he could keep his jutsu active, Sasuke remarked bitterly, even so, it eats through my chakra far too quickly. He had enough chakra to perform 2 complete Chidori before he passed out from chakra exhaustion, which would take around 5 minutes when his Sharingan was active. In actuality, 2 Chidori would be very close to death, but Sasuke would rather face those risks than give his life to his opponent if it came to that. Speaking of which, Gaara attempted to grab the elusive Uchiha with a huge disembodied hand by making a grabbing motion that his sand mirrored. However, Sasuke refused to back down and, much to Gaara's surprise, his lightning defense not only withstood his attack but also rendered the sand it came into contact with unresponsive to his manipulations. Sasuke grinned and gazed directly into Gaara's eyes, which pleased him. The insane red stared at Gaara, unsure of what to do. Next, Sasuke made the kill. One spectator yelled, "Whoa! Will you look at that, our last Uchiha is demolishing the Kage's son," and everyone in the audience applauded. "Perhaps we ought to call him the Urashi," another person proposed, igniting a discussion about whether Naruto or Sasuke should be given the title. Unbeknownst to the people around him, Naruto had overheard the entire exchange and was unable to prevent jealousy from invading his heart. As he gripped his Bakken more tightly, Naruto pondered doubtfully, "Can't I beat Sasuke in anything? Oh my god." The effects of the Chidori Nagashi not only rendered Gaara's Suna no Tate, Shield of Sand, useless, but also rendered his secondary defense, the Suna no Yoroi, ineffective. Without his two strongest abilities, Gaara's weaknesses as a shinobi were now painfully obvious to the world, and to himself, literally. Gaara screamed as he was sent hurtling back from Sasuke's taijutsu assault. Gaara clutched his head, trying to stifle his mother's cries of indignation, but his resolve faltered, and since he had little chance of defeating Sasuke as it was, he used what little sand he had left to form a tightly compacted sphere around himself. Sasuke started concentrating the Chidori Nagashi on his hand, especially the spaces between his fingers, after viewing the action as a personal challenge. "Chidori Senbon!" Sasuke yelled, aware that he had just used up all of the chakra in his Chidori Nagashi on this jutsu. But the cost was justified because the majority of the needles easily penetrated Gaara's sphere. Ga! Sasuke was now positive that he had won and launched the last attack after the Sand Genin cried out from inside his collapsing defense, confirming that his attack had been successful. The Kage thought, "It looks like Gaara-kun just couldn't keep up his end of the bargain. In any case, we'll just have to start the invasion early." With a single-handed seal, he unleashed several hypnotic feathers onto the stadium, with nearly instantaneous effects that affected even the Hokage, who was already suspicious of betrayal. However, the cage was too good for that, and the brief lapse in defense did give the Kage an opportunity to kidnap him from his honor guard and spirit them both away to their private battleground. Naruto was the first person in the stands to shrug off the genjutsu, with his Reiki serving as a natural buffer against the hypnotic effects. However, when he woke up, he found himself in the middle of his own village, where a fierce battle was raging. Naruto quickly used his Shinigami powers after realizing that the death toll was rapidly increasing and that the majority of the dead were sound and sand ninja. Kamakyukai. Tenkan. When Naruto yelled, he felt a chilly rage that belonged to his Shinigami spirit rather than an immediate surge of power. "No," Tenkan said, leaving Naruto completely stunned and perplexed. "No, what do you mean?" When Naruto eventually came to, he responded angrily. There was a war going on all around him, even in his own house, and the one thing that would give him the most power refused to give it to him. "Let me restate." Tenkan's smooth response, "I will not continue to be used as a common tool," made Naruto more and more enraged. "Tool? Oh no. This is not something I have time for." In frustration, Naruto retorted before cutting the connection with his Zanpakuto spirit. When Naruto saw Kakashi, he scanned the arena for a constructive way to let out his anger. The silver-haired Jonin was outnumbered 3-1, but Kakashi used a lightning-fast taijutsu combination to defeat all three of his opponents before Naruto could even move to assist. The Jonin commanded, "Naruto, activate your Reiki, it'll help dispel the genjutsu off of the rest arena," as he emerged from a shunshin. Without missing a beat, Naruto flared his chakra to the maximum, filling the stadium and beyond with his Reiki. Kakashi's tone left no room for debate. With a snap, everyone who was chakra sensitive woke up, a little confused by the genjutsu. When the disillusioned Leaf Ninja realized what was happening, they acted quickly to level the playing field between the Sand and Sound Ninja. Kiba exclaimed, "Yahoo, let's go kick some invader ass," and immediately entered the battle, only for Kakashi's quick reflexes to grab him by the back of his collar. Kakashi winked and said, "Easy there, the Hokage already has a specific mission in mind for you lot, so if you will turn your attention to Sakura, she will debrief you on the situation," before vanishing in a shunshin. In unison, all of the nearby genin focused on Sakura, who was torn between wanting to kill the man for bringing her attention and wondering how Kakashi found out about her recent promotion. But duty soon overcame all other feelings, and Sakura continued by outlining the circumstances. Sakura paused to ensure everyone was on the same page. The village is currently being invaded by Sound and Sand Ninja, And before you ask, the only reason I knew of it beforehand was because I received a field promotion to Chunin after helping uncover their plot, she said. As of now, our orders are to assist any fellow ninja and civilians that are caught in the crossfire of the attack. So that means securing the arena and assisting Sasuke in his pursuit of those Suna siblings. Sakura continued before being interrupted once more by Kiba. Let me go after those sand genin. I'll tear them to shreds with my Gatsuga. Sakura only said, no, which caused the savage shinobi to look at her incredulously. However, Shino grabbed Kiba's shoulder before he could attempt to control the girl, allowing Sakura to clarify her motivations. Sakura quickly reasoned, I'm not questioning your strength, Kiba, but you're a close-range fighter whose primary discipline is taijutsu and supplementary ninjutsu. Gaara has proven, against a stronger opponent, that taijutsu on its own isn't going to be enough. So instead of sending you into a fight where you're likely to end up a liability or worse, dead, I'd rather focus your strengths here where they can be put to far better use, Sakura said, her mind racing with ideas for efficient ways to divide their fighting force. To lessen the likelihood of casualties, the Sandame wanted Sakura to lead all the genin as a single force. However, Gaara's attempt to escape and Sasuke's hasty departure made that plan somewhat more difficult to carry out. Sakura knew that her former love interest would require a lot of support if he was to win this battle against Gaara and his siblings, even though Sasuke was good, great even. Sakura looked around at the gathered shinobi and remarked, so far we've seen that Gaara's main method of attack can be countered with either a high-speed assault or an appropriate use of ranged ninjutsu. In front of her were Haku and Kimimaro from her Doomed Wave mission, as well as the Rookie 9, bar Sasuke, and Team Guy, bar Neji. Sakura quickly recalled all of their advantages and skills, and she was grateful for her big forehead for once, since it contained one of the brightest minds in her generation. Despite Kiba's barely audible complaint, Sakura gave the order, Naruto, Haku, Shino, and Shikamaru. You four will go after the Sand Trio and provide support for Sasuke. And seeing as you probably the smartest person here, Shikamaru, I would like you to lead them. The lazy genin groaned, figures, the one time I show any real effort and I'm now being bombarded with responsibility, before departing with his group. All right, we've taken care of that now. The remaining young people left the stadium without saying anything more. Iruka used water chakra to charge a kunai, then pressed the all-purpose knife against his opponent's blade. As intended, the other weapon slid to the side of his with little opposition. As Iruka stabbed the now lightning tuned kunai into the Sound Nin's sternum, severing it all the way through the spinal column, the Sound Nin's shocked expression was one of his final actions. Before he even hit the ground, the man had already passed away. Iruka turned to look around the arena for any more opposition, but the young Hyuga heiress had already cleared his area. A faint smile appeared on the covert Anbu agent's face as he recalled the stuttering girl he had met years before. But as soon as Hinata administered a water ninjutsu to a man, that expression was swiftly replaced by one of curiosity. Still believing that the young Hyuga would be an easy kill, the Suna Nin was unfazed. However, Hinata grabbed the man with her hand coated in a weak lightning ninjutsu before he could touch her. A water and lightning master like himself could easily predict the consequences, but Iruka must have been taken aback to discover that Hinata had also abandoned the strict Hyuga doctrine of depending only on Juken and started practicing ninjutsu. Iruka thought briefly, interesting, I might have to talk to Sama about some extended tutoring, before focusing on the shapes emerging from the different shunshuns surrounding him. Iruka said amiably, everyone except Yamato Well, it's still good to see you all even if it's under such grim circumstances, clearly identifying every face in the area. In spite of their disparate outfits and locations within the village, Yugo, Kurenai, Asuma, Guy, and Kakashi all made appearances from various posts inside the Colosseum. And belonging to the Vizards was that connection. They found it odd that out of all the shinobi and civilians who were taken prisoner and subjected to experiments, they managed to survive and establish one of the most feared and covert black operations units ever imagined. But behind their metaphorical masks, each of them had scars that no one could see despite their survival, which the new wave of Auto.Nin were going to have to learn the hard way. As he stabbed one poor nin's eye with a single kunai, Kakashi said, sorry I'm late, got lost on the road of life. Guy's opponent was distracted by his eccentric declaration, no fear my hip rival, my youthfulness will be more than enough to make up for you sloth. Like inadequacies, he almost broke the man in two with a well-placed kick while still sporting his $1 million smile. Asuma cut a bloody swath through a pair of sound shinobi who were unlucky enough to come within range of his reliable trench knives. And they're off, man I would think both of them would tire of this game they play, he added. as Kurenai wreaked bloody havoc on the enemy forces by either driving them insane with her bewitchment or turning them against one another. Yugo picked off the more resistant ones with practiced ease. Nearby, the four males could make out the telltale distortions of genjutsu and the faint sound of a ninjutsu cutting the air. Everyone agreed that it was strangely unsettling to watch the two women break down men so easily, but men soon gave in because they were better than those idiots. Kurenai mockingly said, "Try to keep your mouth closed, boys, we still have a lot of work to do," as the two approached another group of sound nin. When the quartet of Jonins heard the loud noises of the duo's work, they were finally persuaded to approach the commotion. Iruka added, "Well, you heard the ladies," before they all jumped into combat. Sarutobi was unsure of how to interpret his adversary. Given that he might not have been able to defeat the traitor snake in his advanced years, he was somewhat relieved that it wasn't Orochimaru. However, he was also offended that his student would undervalue him to the point where only his subordinate would engage in combat. No, the Sandaime Hokage understood what to think of the young imposter Genin Kabuto in front of him after examining him more closely. He was going to make Orochimaru and Kabuto regret committing the most serious of insults to a shinobi of his rank and quality. "Boy, you are 100 years too eerily to be challenging me to a shinobi duel. Where is your master? I know Orochimaru is behind this charade, and the sooner he comes out the sooner I can rectify my greatest mistake." But Kabuto didn't react as Hiruzen had anticipated. "Ha, dear Saru-kun, I do believe you are underestimating me." Sarutobi, enraged by his impudence, waved a crude kunai before throwing it and using a sealless wind jutsu. Sarutobi planned to end the fight with that alone, but instead of the cold steel knife piercing the pseudo Genin's trachea, he was only able to cut off his ponytail. Knowing that his aim was accurate, the Hokage only went to demonstrate Kabuto's superior skill, which greatly unsettled the seasoned combatant. After taking off his glasses, Kabuto played with his bound hair for a while before letting one of his eerily thin hands run through it to remove its homely appearance and give it a startlingly sinister new look. When the Hokage saw this, he became alert right away because he could sense his opponent's aura, and the boy's chakra production seemed to increase dramatically. It shocked and astonished him deeply because it was nearly, if not exactly, the same amount of chakra he had in his heyday. How? The question was straightforward, but it conveyed a lot to the seasoned shinobi. "You miscalculated, old man, when you assumed that it was your student that was in charge. Like he before you, you underestimated my age, thinking it is my liability against an opponent such as yourself. However, let me ask you, do you have the power of a god?" Kabuto let a falsely innocent smile spread across his face as he saw the old man's eyes widen. "I assume you got to what I was speaking of then, correct? The Shikifuin, the only seal that allows someone to make a deal with a death god itself. Well, by itself that power is formidable but fatal. However, when coupled with another technique, say Naiteki Kai, well, let's just say even the soul of a newborn babe can be forever altered," and Kabuto's face turned ominous. Fearing that he would be unable to defeat an opponent like the one in front of him, Sarutobi asked, "What power has my wayward student wrought on you?" "One that even he can't control. For you see, I've always known the Shinigami within me, it whispers and murmurs molding me into what I am." In an attempt to grasp the situation, Sarutobi asked nervously, "And that would be?" "A god. Now shatter." Kyoka Suigetsu, and then a flash of light swept across the rooftop, engulfing the two fighters as they stood. There was a problem. Even down to his bones, Naruto sensed it, and to be honest, it frightened him. Reminding himself that he needed to be strong, especially since Tenkan would no longer be assisting him, Naruto steeled his nerves. The blonde was extremely irritated by the mere reminder of the sword spirit's change of heart, and it was starting to have an impact on his traveling companions. Shino's monotone, "Uzumaki, calm yourself, your excess chakra is fluctuating and is bothering my Kikai," instantly jolted Naruto out of his reverie. Now sensing a platoon of Auto Shinobi closing in on their position, Naruto silently cursed himself for becoming so distracted in the first place and regaining control of the chakra. Whispering, "8 coming from the rear," Naruto said. To the chagrin of his fellows, Shino changed his mind and said, "No, there are 9. My Kikai have relayed the position of the sweeper outside their formation." Shikamaru grimaced as he realized that if anyone had a chance of stopping all of their pursuers, it was him. 9 pursuers so soon. Someone needs to stay behind and take care of them now, otherwise it may be too late to save Sasuke. Shikamaru declared, "Guys, I'll stay behind," before descending from the treetops into a distinctly lower area. As expected, Naruto appeared prepared to fight him, and his 3 traveling companions all halted and stared at him incredulously. The blonde, who was prepared to beat Shikamaru's face for even suggesting that he should stay behind, argued angrily, "Shikamaru, are you crazy? You may be the smartest guy the first no, possibly the smartest ninja bar the old man, but even you know 9 ninja are outside your ability. Haha, it's times like these that you convince me that you'd make a great Hokage." Now, Naruto wasn't anticipating that. The follow through to the temple that killed him like a light and the punch to the diaphragm that sucked the air out of his lungs weren't either. The Chunin gave the order, "Here Shino, you carry him until he regains consciousness, and knowing him it won't be long, so hurry up," just as the bug warrior took off, catching Haku's glare out of the corner of his eye. Haku understand this. Naruto is the only hope this village has at beating Gaara. I don't know how yet, but it's my warranted belief that he will do it, and if that means knocking the future Hokage unconscious to do so, well, I'd do it 1,000 times over again. The ice girl looked at the shadow wielder critically, as though she was looking for any hint of malice in his assertion. A tiny smile appeared on her face when she discovered none. Shikamaru genuinely thought Naruto could become Hokage, and she would always be grateful for that. She left without saying anything, working hard to catch up to Shino and Naruto, who was unable to move. "Now for these idiots," Shikamaru muttered, leaning heavily against one of the numerous trees on Konoha. The shadow user stretched his control into numerous connecting shadows behind him while lying deeply beneath the shaded trunk. Sighed. "Gotcha," hiss. But that was all Kyodaiji could say before Gamahiro decapitated him. The multi-headed snake's death sent the sand and sound ninja into full retreat, but before Jiraiya could follow from his position, a purple blur swiftly encircled the pair, cutting them off from the escaping ninja. "Well, it seems you've finally managed to retain some power with age. I wonder, sitting atop a grand summon like that, looking down on the fleeing forces, do you think that's how Hanzo felt all those years ago?" As he turned to face the eerily familiar voice, Jiraiya wasn't sure if he was filled with regret or rage because Orochimaru was standing in front of him, perched atop the strongest snake summons, and he was practically ready to strike with a devastating blow. "What are you doing here?" Jiraiya's thoughts were racing as he realized the consequences of his former teammate's presence. Was it Orochimaru who defeated Sarutobi? More importantly, did he manage to do it without getting scratched? Finally, and perhaps most significantly, was he successful in defeating a threat that could have killed the god of shinobi? The traitorous snake raised his legendary long sword above his head and exclaimed, "I'm here to kill you, Jiraiya. I'm still an idiot, but I'm feeling generous today, so I'll spell it out for you." Jiraiya was immediately on guard about the action, not because of the weapon's fame but rather because of Orochimaru's technique. Jiraiya could tell right away that something was wrong with the Kusanagi weapon because he had survived numerous encounters with and against the snake Sannin. To begin with, Orochimaru never shows the weapon at first. Instead, he typically hides it in his stomach and uses it when his opponent is most vulnerable. Furthermore, he has never used it unless he is engaged in combat with someone brandishing a weapon just as lethal. Thus, there are only 2 possibilities. Either Orochimaru is using a proxy or his fighting style has drastically changed in recent years, Jiraiya said, keeping a close eye out for any unexpected movements. Not one to let people down, Orochimaru and Manda charged forward without any preamble, attacking from Gamahiro's blind spot. But the big toad was not to be taken lightly, and he was able to avoid Manda's teeth with a huge leap. However, Orochimaru aimed his favorite weapon at the airborne pair with frightening accuracy, and seemingly without warning, the Kusanagi blade extended to impossible lengths, letting Jiraiya know they were far from the clear. Jiraiya commanded, "Hero block." Just in time, as the heavenly blade, in spite of its skill, pressed fearfully hard against Gamahiro's twin katana. The toad's balance was upset by the blow, and as usual, Manda took advantage of the situation and charged forward once more, this time using its whip-like tail rather than his deadly teeth. Gamahiro deflected the blow, but the giant toad was flung into the forest just beyond Konoha's walls due to his awkward angle, which did nothing to absorb the shock. Jiraiya's quick thinking led him to unleash a huge Gukakyu to cover their backs while they collected themselves, but the move was a mistake because both Manda and Orochimaru had vanished from view. Jiraiya spotted a burrow hole tucked away among the trees while scurrying across the battlefield. He exclaimed, "Shit, hero below," just as Manda's tail emerged from beneath the ground to skewer the two from below. Jiraiya saw an opportunity and leapt off the toad's head, instantly starting to fly through a complicated web of seals. Jiraiya completed the high-level jutsu and plunged his hands into the hard earth as soon as he hit the ground. The Sannin exclaimed, "Doden! Yomi Numa!" as the once hard earth changed into a poisonous swamp, in which Orochimaru and his pet summon were now swimming. As expected, The purple snake sprang from its underground hiding place and landed squarely in Gamahiro's waiting grasp. Before Manda could cut its head off its body, the Toad summoned the evil creature with a cry of, "Take this," as his scissored blades found Manda's neck. Even though Orochimaru was distracted by the action, he wasn't going to allow his presence to be overlooked, so Manda's loss wasn't to go unpunished. The words, "Let's see how you like being skewered Toady," Ikoro's Shinso, caused a flash of light to envelop both Sannin. The usually quiet teenager yelled, "Teshi Senden, finger bullet," before shooting 3 auto ninja with a barrage of bone bullets. Even though it was invisible to the trained eye, the bone user secretly set up the fibers of his bones into a seal pattern, and as the attack was called, the seal's latent effects came to life. Before slicing through the skulls of 2 unfortunate sound ninja, the nearly invisible bones flew forth with terrifying accuracy. The third ninja, however, tried to block the bone projectile by wrapping a kunai around his finger, but was surprised to discover that the tiny bone had a far more potent punch than he had expected. As though struck by an Ona's kanabo, the kunai flew from his grasp, taking the finger it was spinning around with it. "Surrender. You are unable to perform any nin or genjutsu, and I extremely doubt you can defeat me in taijutsu while after having lost so much blood." How? Simple. I used a seal to increase the density of my bones several times over. Combine the increased weight with the high speeds it was already flying at and you have a much higher energy output than normal, the user of the bones said with a bored voice. When the sound nin finally fainted from blood loss, his follow-up question was interrupted. Since Kimimaro wasn't eager to divulge his proprietary sealing technique just yet, it's unlikely that he would have received an answer. Amid a mass of rapidly diminishing sound nin chakras, Kimimaro turned his focus to the 7 chakra signatures and remarked absently that Iruka and the Vizards had already reclaimed a third of the stadium on their own. With the arrival of Iruka and his former Anbu team, regaining the arena appeared to be inevitable. The Konoha ninja, however, appeared to be lacking time, as it appeared that the day would only get worse. "Sakura, we need to get to the Hokage now. He's being held captive somewhere near the stadium," Ino yelled, looking like a complete mess, her clothes nearly covered in blood, and her hair that looked like it had been torn from her scalp. Given that their Hokage might be engaged in a life or death battle as they spoke, Ino was not at all bothered by those things after reading the thoughts of nearly dead sound Jonin. Only Sakura and the other genin were aware of this at the time, and even though they were inexperienced, they all understood that it was their responsibility to assist the Hokage, regardless of whether doing so would result in their deaths. Nevertheless, the recently minted pink-haired Chunin gathered her courage and readied herself for what might be her last task. Using all of her inner strength, their pink-haired leader commanded, "Lee, Tenten, Ino, Choji, you're with me. Hinata, Kimimaro, and Kiba, open up a path for us." The genin instantly landed before racing through the gap in the enemy formation made by the Kimimaro seal-charged bone bullets, Kiba's Gatsuga, and Hinata's water jutsu. Despite a few near misses with a lone Jonin, the 5-person group managed to reach the central tower where the Hokage was being held largely unscathed. They moved swiftly, eliminating any sound ninja that happened to wander into their line of fire. But now in front of them was a massive obelisk, and at its summit was a purple beacon-like barrier that contained their village leader. Sakura questioned in frustration, "Ino, is this where the Auto Jonin believed the Sandaime was being held?" She had no prior knowledge of barriers or sealing jutsu, and this seemed like a pretty intricate piece of work. As the group swiftly climbed the barrier, Ino clarified, "Yes, but he was fairly positive that the barrier was impenetrable," pointing out that there was obviously no sound ninja in the area. I begged the question. Was the enemy that certain that the Sandaime would fall, or was Konoha Anbu simply that good? In response to Ino's initial assertion, an unidentified Anbu said, "That is correct, Yamanaka-san. We suspect that no jutsu under S rank could damage the barrier, let alone penetrate it," speaking from behind. When the Anbu team realized they wouldn't be ambushed at their destination, they were surprised to find that the group of genin didn't jump in fear but instead simply relaxed their tense muscles. The first Anbu remarked, "These kids are good, but they still have a long way to go," before mutely urging his team and the genin to focus on the purple barrier in front of them. With his adamantine staff held defensively in front of him, Sarutobi Hiruzen stood in the center, looking left and right as though he were trying to spot an invisible enemy. They were shocked to learn that it was none other than Kabuto, the 7-tome failure. Sakura finally said, "What's wrong with the Sandaime? Sama, can't he see Kabuto?" As Kabuto started to walk calmly as though nothing was wrong. When the Hokage struck out with his staff, did the genin see Kabuto's true strength? Her question was left unanswered. After appearing to be struck, the teenager vanished in an instant. With Kabuto, there were no squandered, irregular movements, but the technique was similar to Naruto's Shunpo. The genin were able to observe that Kabuto was not turning intangible, but rather that he was moving so fast that the Hokage was striking after images, even though it felt like the Hokage's blows were phasing through him. Sakura realized she was right and that the Hokage couldn't see Kabuto, but was using some kind of chakra sensory ability to track the traitor as she dodged with almost uncanny accuracy. Sakura exclaimed, "We have to hurry. At this rate the Hokage will run out of chakra before he can defeat Kabuto," pointing out that the Hokage was probably a step or two behind him in age. The Anbu responded doubtfully, wondering if some kind of genjutsu had been cast over the inexperienced ninja. "Kabuto? He disappeared after that flash of light, and now all we can see is the Lord Hokage. Sama trying to escape from the barrier the four surrounding him are holding up," the Anbu said. Sakura was focused on piecing together the clues that were in front of her, and she wasn't bothered by the man's suspicions. These Anbu and the Hokage, Sama have all been subjected to genjutsu, one that is triggered by a flash of light and is area-wide. Sakura said out loud, "That explains why we can see it but they can't," just before she had an epiphany. Sakura started testing her theory right away. Light can pass through the barrier, which means that energy can as well, and moreover chakra can pass through the barrier, considering that the flash of light you saw placed you all under some sort of powerful genjutsu, she exclaimed. The Anbu was adamant that he and his entire team could not have been subjected to such a potent genjutsu without even realizing it. "Wait, genjutsu? Haruno.san no jutsu less than S rank can possibly hope to penetrate that barrier, I assure you that," he said. Since Anbu remained silent, Sakura concluded that at least the majority of her theory was accurate, probably because you only used elemental jutsu. If the barrier works like I think it is, it only stops solid matter, meaning that all elemental jutsu would be near useless against it. However, genjutsu and pure chakra on the other hand, Sakura continued. Sakura bit her lip in concern as she recalled, but that doesn't mean that he isn't right and only S-class genjutsu or pure chakra manipulation techniques can penetrate the barrier. Recalling the genjutsu that gave her the idea, its effects were quite potent. Sakura stepped forward after thinking, area. Affecting, multiple sense disrupting, self. Sustaining genjutsu, yup, definitely S-class. The rosette channeled her hard .1 chakra into the space between her palms to test her first theory. Other than distortion, the air was indiscernible. "Now for the hard part," Sakura said, taking a tiny breath before extending her accumulated chakra. Although the barrier resisted, some life energy was able to pass through and disturb the dust particles fluttering in the air behind it, much like a towel soaked in water. None of the Anbu were unaware of the results, but the ecstatic Sakura chose to ignore them and exhale in relief before gathering herself and going back to work. Sakura said out loud, "Anbu.san, is anyone on your team a sensor type?" When she didn't receive a response, she questioned whether there had been a protocol violation that prevented the Anbu from responding. Haruno.san, the team leader appeared to have a moment of contemplation. The Anbu appeared to be engaged in a silent argument with himself as he glanced at the barrier and then back at the genin. Another Anbu interrupted, drawing a stern look from his commander. "I think what the captain is trying to say is that only recon, interrogation, and infiltration teams are given a sensor specialist. Our team doesn't fall into any of those categories, so we wouldn't have one," he said. But after a while, the Black Ops team leader calmed down after he realized that no important details about his team had been provided and that his comrade had gotten around the issue, seemingly spitting out facts with casual abandon. Sakura yelled, "Shit," in an unusual display of profanity. Without a sensor nin, she was unable to determine which nin was most susceptible to genjutsu, so her plan to use genjutsu to disrupt the ninja's chakra and cause the entire structure to collapse had little chance of success. Gambling with the life of the Hokage and possibly the well-being of their entire village is not a good idea. Sword type, a voice said. Sakura only heard the last part of the statement and questioned, "What?" "I'm a sensor type, damn it," exclaimed Ino, who had spent the previous few minutes trying to attract Sakura's attention. Sakura retorted, "What? Why didn't you just say so?" after Ino infuriated her. After yelling, "Oh shut up forehead and let me work," Ino closed her eyes and exhaled angrily. Recalling her lessons in torture and interrogation, or TI for short, Ino thought, "Call yourself, find your center, and then let your senses expand." Ino expanded her senses and used her mind's eye to see the chakra of the four sound ninjas. As Ino reflected on her training over the past month, She remembered that there were multiple ways to classify someone based on their chakra, with the most basic being determining whether they were a Tai, Nin, or Genjutsu expert. Ino had learned a few patterns to follow in order to determine a ninja's area of expertise. A taijutsu specialist would check to see if the major muscle groups had a lot of chakra. In contrast, the chakra of a ninjutsu expert would be brightest and more concentrated around the hands, indicating greater reserves. A genjutsu expert's chakra would be the calmest of all, indicating their superior control, and it would be primarily centered around the brain. With her eyes still closed, Ino noted, "The two boys, no wait, 3, the one in the far corner seems to have someone hiding in him, are taijutsu specialists. The 6-armed guy is a ninjutsu specialist," Ino concluded, "and last the girl in the corner closest to us is a genjutsu specialist," before opening her eyes, which were dimly lit by the chakra that was flowing through her. Sakura said, "Good, just what we were looking for," as she approached the redhead who was meditating. As the Anbu commander said, "Haruno-san, what do you plan to do? Remember how I predicted that only pure chakra or genjutsu could possibly pierce the barrier? Well, I figure since it worked but was greatly buffered by the barrier, a genjutsu would have a similar effect. And while it wouldn't be strong enough to influence ninja of their caliber in any way, if we aim it at the one who is most attuned to genjutsu, her chakra may automatically move to dispel it, thus causing the barrier to slip while her chakra fluctuates." For a brief moment, everyone in the room was silent as they marveled at Sakura's brilliance. That is, until the Anbu team's smartass decided it was too good to ignore. Well, I'll be damned. It seems her forehead is used for something other than reflecting sunlight. When Naruto's vision finally returned to normal, he blinked. He found himself in a dojo with a dark cherry wood floor surrounded by crimson and gold fusuma doors, instead of the verdant foliage and resilient trees that adorned his native land. Upon closer examination, it appeared that the sliding doors depicted a tranquil forest with a red sun shining on it. Like the ones he'd seen in his Kyuubi visions. Naruto hurried to his feet and looked around for any demons, wondering why he was in this situation and how he would escape in time to assist his village in the invasion. However, a regal voice called out from behind him, instantly silencing his private questions. "You've finally made it, now we can finally talk." Tenkan poured his tea idly while kneeling at the head of a low table, Naruto's glare piercing his mind. "Impressive killing intent, but Sid, we have much to dis." Naruto angrily responded, "I already said I don't have time for this," before he turned away from the spirit and looked for a way out. A huge error like a fierce wind, a wave of murderous intent swept through the room. The blonde's world came to a halt as he prioritized keeping his heart beating, but even then, the words of the sentient sword continued to stab him in the brain. With a hardened voice, Tenkan thundered, "Listen well, boy. You have abused my power and disrespected my position for the last time," as though he dared Naruto to provoke him. Naruto retaliated, having once again discovered the diamond. Hard resolve that made him Konoha's most unpredictable ninja. "What abuse, what disrespect? Last time I checked you offered me power, and told me to use you," he said. "And like a child you took them, not bothering to learn more of their origin or what consequences that they may entail. You boy are no better than that sealed teammate of yours, wishing to use another's power for your sole benefit," Tenkan said with haunting precision. In silence, Naruto controlled his rage, knowing that Tenkan's assessment would be validated if he flew off the handle. Unfortunately, he lost control, and Naruto quickly crossed the table with a shunpo flash. Only to discover that Tenkan had vanished. Naruto stopped dead in his tracks, tracking the traces of energy left over from Tenkan's flight, when he felt a Zanpakuto's cold steel against the base of his first thoracic vertebrae. "Ah, it seems I've struck a chord. However, regardless of your feelings, my words still hold to be true. You are not but a child toying with powers beyond your comprehension. Then why, in your infinite wisdom, did you let me toy with these powers, Tenkan? I know for a ninja you are awfully gullible. Do you honestly believe I'd give you my name, it being the key to unlocking my power, to you within just moments of meeting you?" The unnamed spirit concluded, lowering his blade and turning away from the blonde. "No, what you know of me is a farce, constructed to test your character as a person, and sadly you have failed in that regard," he said. "So my village will be punished. Look, I don't care if you're mad at me, but I need your power to help defend my village. If that be the cost of your hubris, then yes, your village will suffer and possibly even perish." The sword spirit's icy reaction startled Naruto. There was a part of him that wanted to fight the sword spirit, defeat him, and then make him surrender his power. A partnership would be the only way to save his village if the spirit's words were true, according to another part of the reasoning, which dismissed the action as at best reckless. "Well then, test me again. I don't care the cost, but this time I will prove myself to you." The spirit that was once known as Tenkan was shocked to be asked to retest because it was so. Naruto, are you sure you are willing to go that far? The blonde said, I would do anything for my village. As they engaged in a silent struggle of wills, Naruto stood motionless before his errant partner, his dazzling blue eyes looking into the Shinigami's Scarlet One. Well then your test is to show me that same potential you had in your battle with Kimimaro. And how do I do that? The young shinobi only heard the words, that Naruto, you'll have to figure out yourself, before everything went dark. Shino grunted, shifting his weight in the middle of his step to dodge the senbon hail that was coming at him. With a dull thunk, the metal needles sunk into the tree branch, and based on the purple taint that was oozing from the old timber's branches, neither Leaf Nin needed a medic to inform them that their enemy's weapons were poisoned. Shino looked in the direction of his Kikai's distress, thinking of only one nin you could use poisoned weapons against. Kankuro confirmed Shino's suspicions by taunting, well, color me surprised. You Leaf.Nin actually managed to evade my trap. It's a good thing Temari and I split up then, isn't it? Otherwise you might have gotten to Gaara in time. Shino allowed a barely perceptible smirk to play on his features, betraying his typically zen-like expression. Although his clan had a history of being Konoha's counter to that particular brand of shinobi, Shino wasn't one to leave things to chance, and the bug-wielding boy spent the entire month getting ready for his finals match against the Suna puppeteer. No, Shino spent the entire month searching through his clan's archives for any information he could find about Suna puppeteers, and he was fortunate to find it all. Shino recognized the model from his reading in his clan archive and glared at the Suna puppeteer who stood in front of them, flanked by his powerful puppet. Shino handed the unconscious blonde to the dark-haired Kunoichi and said, Haku-san, you take Naruto and go on. I'll handle this. Idly remarking that was the most Shino had ever said to her, Haku obeyed. Shino-san, be careful, Haku said after pausing to think of something in response. The only sign he had heard her was a nod, and the young ice mistress was gone. However, her flight was not uncontested. Under the expert guidance of its master, Kankuro's puppet launched into action as soon as she removed it, darting swiftly in the direction of its target. However, a wall of Kikai materialized between the two just as the poisoned blades were ready to fall on the escaping female, forcing Kankuro to order his puppet to fully retreat. The Aburame heir, however, persisted in his hunt and attacked his enemy with a second wave of his loyal familiars. Unfortunately, Shino was preoccupied with defending Haku when Kankuro vanished into the trees, leaving only his puppet to fight in his proxy. Shino let his Kikai swarm after recognizing the tactic from his readings. He knew that he only had to latch one female onto his opponent to win the match. Thus, the Chakra. Eating insects covered the intricate ninja tool with their countless masses. The insects instinctively searched for the chakra strings that bound the puppet to Kankuro's will, but Shino's well-known head smashed headlong into multiple caches of powerful insecticide instead of locating the hidden genin at the end of the chakra string road. The only obvious indication of Shino's frustration was his furrowed brows. In one swift move, his adversary destroyed 60% of his hive after reading through his plan and overstretching his forces. The voice of Kankuro bragged from every side, did you think that Stone Age strategy would work? The times when we puppeteers were at your mercy, Aburame, are over, welcome to the future little leaflet. Numerous relay points for his chakra strings and a voice projection technique, Shino concluded as he summoned his weakened forces. Although losing more than half of his colony was devastating, he would have to keep going because his village was on the line. After saying, hopefully the others are having better luck, the Aburame sprang into action. Naruto groaned, UHGGG my head, as he started to stir on Haku's shoulder. The skinny teenager instantly stopped and, in one smooth motion, dropped the blonde onto a tree limb. Haku flew into full medic mode after searching the area for any immediate signs of danger and finding none. Naruto, who was typically leery of doctors due to their propensity to exaggerate even minor injuries, decided he didn't mind Haku's concern. There was a small part of him that felt good about someone his age showing concern. Well, more concern than amiable companionship. After searching for the right word for a few moments, Naruto finally said, this is heaven. He concluded at that moment that being in Haku's care was the greatest place to be, and he would be damned if anyone or anything took that away from him. Which, regrettably, meant that in order to maintain it that way, he would have to go and defeat Gaara. Haku-chan, I'm fine, Naruto said quietly, his voice devoid of any resentment or animosity. Immediately blushing, the brunette medic stammered out a string of apologies without looking directly into Naruto's eyes. With a smile, The blonde softly cupped the girl's hands and gestured for her to meet his eyes. Haku's apologies were all muffled by Naruto's intense gaze as the sky blues gazed intently at his earth browns. When Naruto realized he had her full attention, a gentle, sincere smile appeared on his face, causing Haku to feel an uncontrollable chill. For what felt like an eternity, the two remained in that position before the seriousness of the situation returned. Naruto muttered, "Thank you," and the two of them raced in the direction of Gaara's developing chakra. Sasuke wasn't pleased. Indeed, it could be argued that he was quite irate. Why? As of right now, well, Gaara had changed so that his Chidori Nagashi was useless against his sand armor. He was therefore being flung about like a second-rate shinobi rather than hammering Suna's ace like a typical Uchiha. Sasuke decided it was time to group after taking a particularly nasty from Gaara's mutant arm, before his vision expanded beyond stars. Gaara had to make a clumsy attempt to follow Sasuke as he fled into the forest canopy faster than the sluggish Suna.nin could. After examining the armor more closely with his Sharingan, Sasuke came to the conclusion that he's compacted so much chakra into it that my Chidori Nagashi is no longer disabling it like before. The twin swirling tomos orbiting in his eyes had never made the brooding boy more grateful, but despite their advantages, Sasuke still lacked a reliable method of penetrating Gaara's armor. "Come out, Uchiha. Where is your pride? Did you lose it when you found out your little lightning tricks won't work anymore? Or were you always a coward and simply wants to fight only when his opponents are weaker than himself?" Sasuke attempted to control his rage when he heard Gaara's taunts, but Gaara's words pricked him more than his pride and made the curse seal on his shoulder flash with life. Sasuke gritted his teeth in an attempt to ward off the dark euphoria that was engulfing his chakra coils, but he soon discovered that the effort was almost futile. "Go demonstrate your strength and make him regret questioning your Uchiha ancestry." As the fiery trials of the curse seal adorned his body, Sasuke inhaled deeply and let the whispering of the seal distort his thoughts. Sasuke exhaled and allowed a demon-like grin to appear on his face before acting. For the Uchiha survivor, time slowed. He was the only one who could move normally, while the rest of the world seemed to be sifting through mud. The power the seal gave him was like a drug, a narcotic that slaked his insatiable desire for power and fueled his superiority psychosis. It felt good, no, better than good. Sasuke completed the hand seals for the Chidori mid-run by weaving past Gaara's arm of sand and then swung the lightning spear into his opponent's extended arm. Even though the attack on his sand-made pseudolimb didn't physically hurt Gaara, he was startled to see how the Raiden techniques, which had previously been ineffective, were now piercing his defenses like a kunai through flesh. Gaara's transformation took a turn for the worse when the sentient sand armor that shielded him started fortifying itself with crazy amounts of Yuki-laced chakra after realizing how dangerous its host was. Time sped back for Sasuke as a powerful killing intent swept through the area, and Gaara's thicker and fully repaired sand armor stopped his curse seal. Enhanced speed in its tracks. As he struggled with Gaara's enhanced Suna no Yoroi, the trapped boy let out an involuntary grunt of pain as the torque from the abrupt stop almost tore his arm out of its socket. But the dark power came at a cost, and Sasuke's chakra reserves were depleted at a startling rate in exchange for his enhanced strength and speed. The drain was so bad that the dark-haired prodigy could only watch with his Sharingan. Enhanced vision as the blow came when Gaara reared back to deliver another of his dizzying haymakers. Nighty-night Uchiha, as he watched his curse seal fade and his supercharged Chidori fade into oblivion. Sasuke's world jerked violently and he was sent hurtling through the famous forests of his homeland. An annoyingly familiar voice called out to Sasuke, urging him to leave his blissful sleep and return to the world of the living. "Whoa there, champ, don't die on me yet," the voice said. "Dobi, he's strong, be careful," Sasuke said in a tense tone. Sasuke's plea was so urgent that Naruto's eyebrows shot upwards. Did Sasuke turn to his rival for assistance because he was so humbled by his opponent's strength? Given Sasuke's potential as a giant jackass, Naruto was not pleased about the idea of facing a foe who would make him feel inferior. Noted. "Haku, stand back for a second, I want to see what we're up against. After I've assessed the threat, I'll leave it to your discretion on how to proceed." Naruto steeled himself, ran off in a rush of shunpo, and then reappeared over Gaara. The altered teenager was unable to respond because Kukagiri was already descending on him at breakneck speed as soon as he saw Naruto with a full chakra. Gaara's sand armor splattered violently against the edge of the wind chakra. But like the Chidori before it, the dense, self-repairing sand swiftly repelled Naruto's attack. With a quick thought, Naruto flashed shunpo at Gaara's counter and, when he reappeared, used Mizurappa, a Suiden, to take Gaara down. The water turned the normally malleable sand into soggy silt, which was less responsive than fine sand grains, even though water jutsu is normally useless against earth jutsu. Now let's give it another go. Kukagiri. A wedge of wind chakra cut through Gaara's protective cloak just like it had before, but this time the slash not only got past the defenses but also appeared to have nullified the sand's regeneration factor. As a group of freshly spawned clones blasted Gaara with Sweden Mazarapa from all directions, Naruto saw his opportunity and hurried in, leaving Gaara soggy, covered in silt, and slow to react. The blonde was barely ready for Naruto when he emerged from his Shunpo K's no Doki, howling angrily around his blade. Unfortunately for the blonde, the threat of his attack caused Gaara's ultimate defense to once more reinforce itself with Yuki. Laced chakra and adapt, this time completely encasing Gaara in sand and giving the desert child a third appendage to use. Even with his strongest swing, Naruto's powerful chakra was unable to penetrate the shield that was held up by the combined energies of Gaara and Shukaku. To Gaara's astonishment, however, Naruto was still able to cut his forehead after his condensed wind chakra ground through half of his tail and all of the sand turned silt on his face. The tail, which he almost split in two, swiftly reformed and in a cunning move to trap his form to desert coffin over his hands while he was gaping at Gaara's attack. Raging at the sight of his own blood in his eyes, Gaara reared his arm back while gathering air and chakra into its gullet. Anticipating the futon jutsu that would follow, Naruto tried to dodge via Shunpo, but was stopped by a manically grinning Gaara. Naruto flared his Reiki, poured all of his chakra into his urate, and prayed to Kami above that he would survive the next attack. His prayers were answered when a black-haired beauty chose that precise moment to use Suigaden, a Suiden, to counter Gaara's wind jutsu. The two jutsu collided with explosive force, spraying water everywhere, but luckily for Naruto, his urate shielded him from the worst of the damage. The water spikes, which resembled Haku's ice jutsu, formed from thin air and swiftly converged at Gaara's mouth, avoiding the blonde completely and shielding him from the sand demon's attack. As fate would have it, Naruto spoke too soon because as soon as the torrential surge subsided, Gaara had already finished the motions for one dozy of a hit, but this time he'd taken to coating his arm with a lethal amount of wind chakra. Well, better that than dead, Naruto reasoned, knowing that with as much chakra Gaara put behind that blast, he very well might have ended up just a red stain on the forest floor. As Gaara called a fist, Naruto saw in slow motion that his Shunpo path was directly in line with the freight train, but just as impact appeared imminent, he found himself safely on a tree branch. I won't make it in time, Naruto realized. Substitution, but where's, and then he realized that Haku had saved him from what might have been death by substituting herself for him at the last second, but in return, she had been placed under the non-existent mercy of the insane beast that Gaara had become. He was overcome by feelings of anger and inadequacy, which unintentionally fueled the void inside his heart. Nevertheless, Naruto ignored the eclipsing darkness and directed his remaining coherence toward the captured girl in front of him. Haku. The girl gave a barely audible whimper in response to the boy's cry, which only made Gaara grind her under his arm more forcefully. He unleashed his most powerful Kukagiri to date, and when his sandy limb was severed entirely, the only sound that filled the air was Gaara's crazed laughter. Gazing into Naruto's eyes, a familiar red started to creep into the corner of his eye. Uzumaki, there's only one way to free her from my sand, Gaara taunted, finishing his thought with a fiendish grin. And to kill me at that. Before completely changing into the legendary Suna beast, the possessed boy let out a roar, only to discover that there were others who had also experienced a change. The red-haired ghost whispered, and so the true test begins, before using his power to engulf Naruto's consciousness.
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.